Hello, I'm Gil Zilkha and welcome to my channel. This is my continuing series entitled Essential Classical Music, where we discuss the best recordings of the major works in the standard repertoire. Today we're going to be discussing orchestral works. Now, not all the major orchestral works. I already did, I'm sort of dividing it into thirds. So I started with the major symphonies, which is already a large chunk of the orchestral repertoire, of course. And then I moved on to the major concertos. And now I'm pretty much doing everything else. Now, when I discussed the concertos last time, I mentioned that I wasn't necessarily doing all the concertos per se. I was mainly focusing on works where you have a soloist or soloists who are front and center and are being partnered with an orchestra. So there's a partnership between the soloist and the conductor. Whereas you might have a piece that's called a concerto, but it features many soloists, and really it's not the soloist that's really the center of the show. Now, for the orchestral works we're going to be discussing, a lot of them are overtures and preludes. Sometimes they're composed and they just stand alone, or they are used in like a larger work, commonly in opera. We're also going to be discussing a lot of tone poems, and these works are particularly they are used to describe. Sometimes they're programmatic, not always. But usually they're descriptive, and they can often be very colorful in the way that they use the different instruments to depict something. So that is what we're discussing today. Now, again, my background is I am a classical music enthusiast. I've been collecting and comparing recordings for several decades. I actually was a clerk at Tower Records in the old classical room they used to have at Tower Records. Wasn't that fun when you had a room that was just for classical music and people could come in there and discuss, and it was really fun to have someone come in and kind of give them a spiel on different recordings or different works. So that's kind of what I get to do here in this video. My favorite part of the classical room, though, was because in the old days it was open till midnight, and between like 10:30 or like 11 and midnight there'd be almost nobody there. So I could just play whatever I wanted to, and I could just unwrap any recording and sample it and put it back. And it was great for orchestral works, especially because you had these wide dynamic ranges. Sometimes the music gets so soft that if they're customers, they don't even know that anything is playing, and then all of a sudden, boom, something comes out of nowhere to kind of, make them jump. So it was nice to have that kind of solitude to listen to more music. So let's go ahead and get started. And for the very first piece I'm going to discuss, this is actually a set of concertos. But as I was saying, it's not, it has featured soloists, but it's not like one, major soloist or two that are front and center. And these are the Brandenburg Concertos of Bach, really Bach's orchestral masterpiece. If I was to pick out a couple that really stand out, there's the second, which again features a trumpet, but I can't really call it a trumpet concerto because the trumpet doesn't even play during the middle movement. You have other instruments that get solos. But it has a wonderful final movement. It actually was the theme song for the fiery line with William F. Buckley. Yes, that, if you remember that show on PBS, that was their theme song. And then the fifth Brandenburg Concerto is also really great. A wonderful solo and even a cadenza for the keyboard part. So for the Brandenburg Concertos, my prime recommendation is this goodie from the olden days. This is Benjamin Britten and the English Chamber Orchestra from 1968. The sound is wonderful. It's not really dated at all. It sounds very, very warm and full. And the playing is very stylish. Britten was a very good conductor, especially with Baroque and classical repertoire. It may be just slightly on the heavy side compared to maybe what the performance style we're used to today, but not much, and it's still very charming and buoyant, and I think a great way to get to know these works. Now, if you do want something a little bit more modern, we also have an excellent alternative choice in the period instrument category. This is where they duplicate the instruments that were used in the Baroque period. So you have the old instruments, you have greater transparency, often you can kind of play more quickly, you have more clarity, and they often employ faster tempos. Now the old standard for this one is the one that I recommend, which is Trevor Pinnock with the English Concert, and this is from 1982. And Pinnock and the English Concert, they're a great kind of gateway into period instrument performances for people who are not used to them. They're very musical, very stylish. They don't tend to be overly fast, and also they have a nice warm sound. And so these are a wonderful. They're also, just like the Britten, a wonderful way to get to know these works. Now, switching back to a modern instrument recording, but a little bit newer, we have Imusigi. This is from 1984. It's a digital recording, and this is just a really beautiful recording. They have a really sweet sound, really sweet tone. So if you really like hearing, if you're not so big on maybe the percussive clarity and you want to hear something more sumptuous and sweet, this is an excellent recommendation as well. Going back to the period instrument versions, we also have one from 1991 that is really good, from Jordi Savall with Les Concerts des Nations. This one is a bit on the quicker side. It's virtuosic, but it's also very beautiful, almost sensuous, the way they phrase things. It's a really gorgeous recording. And another one that I would say is good for people who maybe are not used to period performances, because the sound is really lovely. Now, a couple of vintage performances I want to recommend. One comes from Pablo Casals, who was a real early champion of Bach. These are from the mid-60s, and this is with Casals' Marlborough Festival Orchestra. It features Rudolf Serkin playing piano, and these interpretations, they're a little bit idiosyncratic maybe. Sometimes it can be faster than we're used to, sometimes it can be slower. Casals, though, he was really, his main interest was a connection with the music. And so there's a lot of humanity and warmth and just a love of the music that it's great if you want to hear these concertos, maybe done in a different way, but done in a way that's really heartfelt. Now, another recording that is also, I would say, heartfelt and displays a love of the music, and also has Rudolf Serkin on piano, is this classic from 1935. This is conducted by Adolf Busch. This is with the Busch chamber players. And if you hesitate to listen to historical recordings, you might still want to give this a try, especially for something that's Baroque repertoire, where we don't think of the 1930s as being representative of the best. This really is a very musical set of recordings. Has a lot of great soloists, and it's not very heavy and sluggish. Actually, they really do a good job in communicating Bach to a new audience, but doing it in a way that's stylish, and it doesn't sound overly romantic, but still it also communicates a lot of warmth and love for the music. So this is an old classic, and I think it still holds up well today. The sound quality is dim. It is a studio recording, though, so it's not. It is clear enough to where you can hear what's going on. Certainly, it doesn't have the presence and fullness of a modern recording. Okay, so let's look now at the orchestral suites, which often can be coupled with the Brandenburg concertos. The suites are not, they don't have the sonata form, the three movement form, so they're a little bit longer. Really colorful, great works, especially number 2. And then maybe the most famous thing Bach ever wrote, arguably, the air on a G string, comes from the 3rd suite. Now for this one, my top recommendation is a modern instrument recording from Neville Marriner, another great Bach conductor. This is with the Academy of St. Martin in the Fields, dating from 1970. Very good recording quality, very warm and full, and there's a wonderful sound to the whole thing. Very ethereal, which is good for the orchestral suites. A lot of lovely string playing. So I highly recommend this one. If you do want a little bit more snap and in a period performance, I recommend John Eliot Gardner, another wonderful Bach conductor. And this is from 1983. So it's one of the more early period performances, but it's really has a good fullness to the sound. It's stylish. It's not overly fast. However, for example, in the end of the orchestral suite number 2, you have the famous Badineri for flute, which is just exhilarating. It's just fast and a lot of fun. So this is an excellent choice if you want period performances. And then finally, I will go back to the Bush Players again. They recorded the suites in 1936, and again, you get the same qualities you have with the Brandenburg concertos, warmth and lovely playing. Marcel Moisy was a great flutist of the day. He's on this recording. And then the air on a G string, the air from suite number 2. Personally, I've never heard a more lovely version of it than this one. It's fairly slow, but they sustain it beautifully, and it's just really touching. So that is the orchestral suites. And I want to talk about one more orchestral work, orchestral in quotes, of Bach, because it really wasn't composed as an orchestral work or a set of orchestral works, and that is the Art of the Fugue and A Musical Offering. And these are both pieces that Bach wrote. Really, it wasn't clear what he was writing them for. It started out, I think it was first performed as a keyboard work, and you can certainly find them that way. But it's also been orchestrated. And we have this lovely recording from the 60s and 70s from Karl Münchener and the Stuttgart Chamber Orchestra. And they really do a great job. Both pieces start with a theme and then just continually build on that theme. You know, Bach was the master of the fugue, and it really is a mesmerizing experience. These are both just wonderful masterpieces, and this recording does a great job. It has warmth, but it also has clarity, and it just does a great job of presenting both pieces in a way that just captivates you and holds your attention. So this one is a Bach recording I highly recommend. Okay, so that is Bach. And as I've done in my other videos, I'm going to just go straight through the alphabet. And so now we come to a 20th century composer on the American side of the Atlantic, and that's Samuel Barber. And I am going to discuss his most famous work, the Adagio for Strings. Being a Gen X person, I first learned about this piece by watching Platoon. I think it was also used in The Elephant Man, if I'm not mistaken, but it's a very popular work, very powerful, just very stark and dramatic. And my main recommendation for this one is an old classic. This comes with the New York Philharmonic, conducted by Thomas Shippers, from 1965, and this is a wonderful issue, by the way. It's an all Bach program on this CD from Sony. It sounds excellent, good 60s recording, and the interpretation it's very natural. He's not imposing his will or being overly dramatic, but he really he really hits the high points very well in this recording. The emotions of the piece come through very strongly, and it's very, very poignant, as it should be. I really only have one other sort of secondary choice, and this is in a little bit better sound, and this comes from Neville Marriner, maybe a surprise to some. This is an all-American program as well. This includes the Ives Symphony No. 3 and Copland Quiet City. The Adagio for strings, it sounds fantastic, and the Academy of St. Martin in the Fields is an excellent group, to hear string music any day of the week. So they sound very beautiful. It's maybe just a little bit on sort of the faster side. There's more clarity to the playing, sort of a sheen on the sound that really is beautiful. So that's another way of hearing the Adagio for strings that I think is also very powerful. So that is Barber. Now let's move to another 20th century composer, this time Hungarian, Béla Bartók. And we're going to discuss the two orchestral masterpieces, the Concerto for Orchestra and the Music for Strings, Percussion, and Celesta. Both of them are just fabulous pieces. Again, the Concerto for Orchestra, I didn't mention it in my last video because this is really a piece that is for the orchestra itself, not focusing on a soloist, although certainly it gives the different instruments lots of opportunities to shine. My prime recommendation for these pieces comes from a wonderful set of Bartók's orchestral works from a fellow Hungarian conductor, Antal Dorati. The two pieces we're discussing for today are both with the London Symphony. These were recorded in the early 60s. Although the other works, there's also the BBC Symphony and even the Minneapolis Symphony. You get also the Miraculous Mandarin and the Wooden Prince, other great orchestral works, as well as Bluebeard's Castle is on here as well. So this is a great, and also the second violin concerto with Yehudi Menuhin. So this is a great investment if you want to get into Bartók orchestral works. First of all, the recording is excellent. It's the Mercury Living Presence, which they always did a great job of detail and vibrancy. And then the interpretation is great. He doesn't treat it as just an orchestral showpiece, which it is, certainly, but also there's these mysterious elements, and he certainly fleshes that out as well. And for me, if you're really wanting to learn to love these works, I think this is a great introduction. Now, the old classic, I want to mention that one next, also recorded around the same time, actually in the late 50s, comes from Fritz Reiner with the Chicago Symphony. This is the RCA Living Stereo, which is also excellent recording quality. I mean, just some of the best Bartók recording you'll ever find. The Chicago Symphony under Reiner, as always, they are spectacular. Reiner was a very natural conductor. He wasn't one to impose his will or do anything idiosyncratic. He really allowed his players to shine, which is a good quality to have, especially in the Concerto for Orchestra. It is a little bit, he could be a little bit sort of a just the facts type conductor. That's sort of the other side of the coin. It's not, I was mentioning Dorati sort of plays that, he has that atmosphere of mystery. You don't hear that as much in this recording. It's more sort of, just playing it straight. But it's still, beautiful and exciting in a way that, you're just about not going to find anywhere, which is why these are classic recordings. Now, if you do want a little bit more of, shall we say, interpretive insight, we have Ferenc Fricsay. Wonderful conductor, always was good with the dramatic pacing, and so it is here. The concerto was recorded in stereo, 1957. This is with the Berlin Radio Symphony, and it is better recorded than the Music for Strings, Percussion, and Celesta, which is mono from 1953, although not bad, but certainly a little bit more dim, so not necessarily an ideal choice for these works, but it's a very intense, very dramatic. He does a great job of setting the atmosphere, and if you enjoy these works, this is an interpretation you're going to want to hear. Now, I want to also discuss a few recordings of the pieces separately that warrant attention. One is the conductor who premiered the work, Serge Koussevitzky. This is from 1944 with the Boston Symphony. This is a live recording reissued on Naxos. Now, I don't know if this one is still available. There may be another label or two that have put it out, but it really is exciting. Now, I will mention he changed it was so new, so hot off the press that Bartók actually changed the ending of it after this was issued. So that may startle you if you know the work very well. But this really is an exciting performance, wonderful atmosphere, and I will say you have that sense of new discovery, which obviously this was, which really does give it another element of freshness. We often say about conductors, the best ones are the ones who make it sound like they are composing the work on the spot, or that you're hearing it for the first time. And certainly Koussevitzky was already that way as a conductor, and even more so in this recording. It's really a great concerto for orchestra. Now, the sound does take some tolerance. Not only is it 1944, but it's live, so it's somewhat noisy, but it does have pretty good presence for a recording of that age. So once you get past that, you're still going to enjoy it if you love this work. Now, for the music for strings, percussion, and Celesta, we have a couple of others I want to recommend. One is from 1970, and this is also a live recording. This is with Evgeny Merevinsky and Leningrad Philharmonic. Now, if you remember from my video on the symphonies, they were a very dramatic outfit. They just never held back. They did the wonderful Tchaikovsky and Shostakovich, and this Bartók recording is also just really impassioned and dramatic, and one that you definitely are going to want to hear. The sound, now it is 1970. It does have a pretty good presence, but it is a live recording, so it's a little bit noisy. There is one from 1965, which is really there's not much to compare between them. I think this one is maybe slightly more intense, but the other one may be slightly better recorded. You can't go wrong with either one. Now, one more recording of this work I want to mention, however, is a mono recording, but this is a studio recording. And this is with Raphael Kubelik during his tenure with the Chicago Symphony. This was recorded in 1951. It's mono, but it is Mercury Living Presence. So you do get the benefit of their recording techniques, which were ahead of their time. So you get pretty good clarity and presence. And Kubelik is another conductor who was really good with bringing the drama and the power and the intensity. And you certainly get that here. This is not a version of the work that is just, just the facts at all. This is a very intense, impassioned performance, and the Chicago Symphony, this is just a few years before Reiner's recording. The Chicago Symphony plays impeccably, so this is a really exciting version. Okay, so that is Bartók. We're going to move now to Beethoven. And for Beethoven, now we come to what I was discussing earlier. We have some overtures. Sometimes an overture could be written and the rest of the work was either never completed or isn't really one that's, we hear a lot today, so the overture becomes really famous. Or sometimes we do take the overture to an opera, and that is programmed in either a concert or a recording. So for the Beethoven overtures, we have, first of all, the Egmont. That is really the overture of choice, so to speak. If you know classical music at all, you probably have heard this before. Then there's also the Creatures of Prometheus. The Coriolan is a wonderful overture. The Ruins of Athens. And then we have Fidelio, which is Beethoven's opera, but within Fidelio, we also have three arias for Leonore, the heroine of the opera. So quite a bit for an orchestra to do outside of the opera. And for a complete set, or I think a near complete set of the overtures, I recommend this one from the 1970s. This is Kurt Masur conducting the Leipzig Gewandhaus. Masur was maybe not known as the most individual or exciting Beethoven conductor, but these are really crisp performances that they're not idiosyncratic at all. They hit all the right notes, and I think it's a great way to get to know these pieces. The sound is wonderful. The Leipzig Gewandhaus, wonderful orchestra, a beautiful string sound. The recording quality is very good. And I think for a consistent package of these overtures, this is an excellent choice. Now, we also have, as part of his set of the symphonies, the complete set of the symphonies, we have this one from Karl Boehm and the Vienna Philharmonic. I've already said this is actually the only complete set of Beethoven symphonies I own. I'm very picky about consistency, and I think this is the most consistently good symphony cycle on the market. And I would have to say it's right up there too in terms of the overtures. Now it's not as complete as the Masur. It's got the Egmont, of course. We've got the Creatures of Prometheus, Coriolan, Fidelio, Leonore number 3. So really all the big ones. And as it is with the symphonies, it's a very powerful interpretations, wonderful sound. The Vienna Philharmonic, just sounding wonderful. And the only thing, as I would say with the symphonies, is the tempos can be a little bit on the slower side. But Boehm understood his Beethoven, and he always had that power and that relentlessness to his conducting that makes it a very powerful experience. Now, another conductor you can say the same thing about in terms of the slowness and the power, of course, is Otto Klemperer. And part of his cycle of the Beethoven symphonies, we also get the overtures. We get now I have them in these individual discs. So with the Sixth Symphony, and I don't know if it's packaged this way anymore, but the original issues of the single issues of the symphony, you got the Egmont with the Sixth Symphony as well as the Prometheus overture, but the Egmont also includes incidental music, the incidental music for Egmont, which here we have Christa Ludwig as well. So that's, wait, is it Christa Ludwig? I think it's actually Birgit Nelson. I might have to check this later when maybe it's Nilsson. I could have sworn we have somebody really good singing as part of this too. But of course the main thing is the overture. And then in this one, this is actually a disc of all overtures. All 3 Leonore overtures, the Fidelio, the Coriolan. And so we get Klemperer's customary power and just relentlessness. It's Klemperer just had this way with Beethoven. Sometimes after you hear Klemperer and you go to another performance, it feels like it's missing something, and it's that gruffness that seems to mirror Beethoven's own sort of gruffness, and so that's really unmistakable. Even though they can be a little bit on the slow side, and especially since this was very late in Klemperer's career when he tended towards slower tempos. But at the same time, you can't leave out Klemperer when you're talking about Beethoven orchestral music. Now, as I mentioned, the Egmont overture is Beethoven's most familiar. I want to mention a couple of really great Egmonts that are just, by themselves. One is a no-brainer, and that's Ferenc Fritzsche. This is with the Berlin Philharmonic, recorded in 1958. And if you're going to get any Beethoven overture recording, I would say get this one. First of all, it comes with my top choice for the Beethoven Ninth. So how can you not get it? But the Egmont overture is no slouch either. It's powerful. There's wonderful tension and drama. He paces it just very well. So that is a top choice for the Egmont, as is this one from Wilhelm Furtwängler with the Berlin Philharmonic. Just like Klemperer, you need to hear Furtwängler's Beethoven, even though the recordings are all in mono, and in this case, a live recording, but pretty decently recorded. This is from 1947, and Furtwängler's gift for dramatic pacing is on display here. It's just a really great interpretation that you're not going to want to miss. Now, when discussing Furtwängler and Beethoven overtures, I have to mention one more recording, and that is the Coriolan from 1943. That was recorded, of course, during the war. It's also a live recording. It's fairly well recorded, though. It was recorded on that magnetic tape that they used, which has fairly good presence and clarity for its time. This is a recording really for the ages. It is absolutely, the Coriolan was maybe the most dramatic overture that Beethoven wrote. Very, very tragic, and the emotions in this performance are just palpable. It's just, you really feel it. It's sort of like the ninth that he recorded in 1942. It's the emotions are very raw, and they're just in this zone. So I really highly recommend this one if you want to hear a great recording of a Beethoven overture. This is a Tara issue. It also was issued on Deutsche Grammophon, as was, of course, the Egmont overture I just mentioned. And you can get all of those in this box that I talked about in my talk on the symphonies. This box is one of the best Furtwängler bargains that there is. Just all his Deutsche Grammophon recordings, including the ones that were recorded live, as well as some Decca recordings. There's some more that I'm going to mention later on in this video. So this box is a really good investment if you can find it. I understand that it was issued originally, and then I think it might have gone out of print, but hopefully it's one that you can find, because as far as I'm concerned, that is that one and the Audite box are the two top packages you can find of great Furtwängler recordings. Okay, so that gets us through Beethoven. Now I want to mention Brahms and his famous Hungarian dances. Most of us as kids probably learned the Hungarian dance number 5. Bum 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 ba-da-dum, bum ba-da-dum. There's that one. But the whole set of 21 is just great. Is it 21 or 19? Actually, I tend to forget. Okay, it is 21. Okay, 21. And for these pieces, I recommend Claudio Abbado with the Vienna Philharmonic. This was recorded in 1982, so it's a digital recording. And it just sounds great. They really have this music under their belt. Abbado was a wonderful Brahms conductor. It's got excitement, virtuosity, charm, warmth, all the things that you're looking for in the Brahms Hungarian dances. So that's Brahms. All right, so now we are moving on to the letter C. And we're going to go back to, again, the American side of the Atlantic, and maybe America's most celebrated classical composer, Aaron Copland. The thing about Copland is he really created a sound world that was distinguished as being American. I was discussing earlier that we're going to be talking about a lot of tone poems, which is music that emphasizes less structure and melody and is more about being descriptive. And the description of the American landscape with Copland's work, especially with his masterpiece, the Appalachian Spring, is something that really distinguishes him. And my prime recommendation for Copland orchestral works is, no surprise, this is the old classic. This is Leonard Bernstein, the composer's friend, with the New York Philharmonic, recorded in very good stereo in the early 60s. And here you get the Appalachian Spring in a very warm, sympathetic, very vibrant interpretation. And you also get the Fanfare for the Common Man, which is another famous Copland work. You know, it goes bum 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 dum 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 dum. You know, most of us have probably heard that one, done very well and with lots of passion in this one. And you also get a couple of again descriptive American Western landscape pieces, Rodeo and Billy the Kid, which are also wonderfully done. So this is really a no-brainer if you're wanting to get to know Copland for the first time. Okay, so our next composer now is going backwards a couple of hundred years. This is Corelli and his Concerti Grossi, Opus 6, a set of 12 concertos, again, not featuring a particular instrument or instruments, but more of a, you know, or it's a concerto in sort of its structure, but it's a really more of a general orchestral piece. And these are great pieces if you're ever in this mood, you know, you don't feel like hearing anything too dramatic or passionate, and you just want to play something that's got this nice Baroque charm and grace to it. These are great pieces. And my top recording for this one is a group we've already discussed, the English Concert with Trevor Pinnock. These are period performances from the late 80s, and they play with style and grace and nice warmth for period instruments. And they just, you know, they really they bring out the charm of the works and the beauty in a way that I think you don't even need a modern instrument recording. This really fits the bill. All right, so that is Corelli. Now let's move to a great French composer, one of the greatest composers of all time, especially since he really brought a new musical language to classical music, and that's Debussy. Debussy went away from the sort of the classical German, you know, structure, and his music was more colorful, descriptive, impressionistic. It's kind of vague. He got a lot of criticism at the time for that. Some people looked at his music as kind of almost like kitsch. But fortunately, that was not a reputation that stuck. And he and his fellow countryman, Maurice Ravel, are both revered today for the beauty of their orchestral works. Now, for an introduction to Debussy and Ravel, for that matter, we have this wonderful recording from the Berlin Philharmonic with Herbert von Karajan, recorded in the mid-60s. Now, first of all, let me mention the sort of main works I'm going to discuss for Debussy. His two masterpieces, really, and that is the Prélude à l'après-midi d'un faune, and also the three-movement La Mer, which means the sea. Now, the Prelude is the afternoon. It's about the awakening of a faun. Now we're not talking about a baby deer. A faun in this context is he's like a half goat, half human mythological creature that's awakening, and he's sort of going through this mystical journey where he's visited by nymphs. So it's a very sensual piece, and Karajan and Berlin really bring out that quality of it. That's why for me, that's my first choice. That just the beauty of sound, the lusciousness, it just envelopes you and carries you into that mystical world. And then the C is just what it says it is. It's a musical description of the sea. This also has this gorgeous sound that kind of carries you into that mystical world. There's also drama involved. With the sea can get rough sometimes. So Karajan also does that very well. Now, some people think of Karajan in Berlin for this repertoire as being a little too heavy and putting too much emphasis on the beauty of sound. I'm obviously not in that club, but an alternate recording I would recommend is from Eugene Ormandy and the Philadelphia Orchestra, which also has beautiful sound, beautiful playing, but it's maybe not as overtly luscious, perhaps. It's a little bit more straight-laced, but it definitely allows the music to speak, which is something that Ormandy did very well. And you get the great Philadelphia strings as well, who are every bit the match of the Berlin strings. This recording is from 1959. It is also a stereo recording, very good quality. And now, one more I want to recommend for that coupling is a mono recording, but fairly good sounding mono, and this comes from Guido Cantelli and the Philharmonia. This is from 1954. And Cantelli was a wonderful conductor whose life was unfortunately cut short, but his recording of the Prélude, it's very sensitive, very warm and beautiful. And then La Mer, I think, has an extra element of intensity and drama to it that really adds something as well. So if you love these pieces, despite the mono sound, I think this is one that you should check out. Now, a couple of recordings of maybe just hearing the pieces separately. This one is just, if you thought Karajan was lush, you should hear Stokowski. This is from 1957. It's a very long interpretation, and he really milks the beauty. It's the orchestra. It's just like his symphony orchestra that they recorded with the full dimensional sound, which sounds just gorgeous, just beautiful and vibrant. Don't worry about the age of the recording. This just really sounds great. And it gets the Stokowski treatment. It may sound a little bit schmaltzy, perhaps to some, but I think it's gorgeous, and it's a renowned recording for a reason. You also get in this recording you get the arrangement of Stokowski of maybe certainly Debussy's most famous short work, which is Clair de Lune, which is written for piano. Bum blum bum 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 bum. Most everyone knows that one, but this arrangement is, again, it can sound a little schmaltzy, but it's really beautiful. So highly recommended. Now, if we're talking about La Mer, one recording that we cannot forget, especially if you like to hear the really loud parts dramatically done and with great clarity and virtuosity, we have to mention this one, Fritz Reiner and the Chicago Symphony. This was recorded in 1960, and it is one of the absolute demonstration classical recordings of all time. The RCA Living Stereo, the clarity is just incredible, the vibrancy, and I want to say don't get me wrong. It's not like this is only about the climaxes. It's a very beautiful sounding recording. And like I said, Reiner was a conductor who was very natural, and he let his orchestra shine, and they do so here. The Chicago Symphony just plays brilliantly and beautifully, and this is a must for La Mer. Now, an older recording from the late 40s that I want to mention comes from one of the great 20th century conductors, Victor de Sabata. This is with the St. Cecilia Orchestra, recorded again in the late 40s. And it is certainly on the dim side. It's kind of distant, a little bit muddy, but actually really for the late 40s, it's not a bad recording. And De Sabato was one of the best conductors I've ever heard in terms of dramatic pacing and tension. And this is a really intense recording that's really captivating from beginning to end. He does a great job of setting the atmosphere. So even though the sound is not the best, it's still one that I think you should hear if you love La Mer. As is a recording from much further back. This is one of those pioneering recordings. A friend of the composer, Piero Coppola. This is from the early 30s. We get both the Prélude à l'après-midi d'enfant and La Mer, as well as several other works of Debussy. So Coppola was certainly an early champion of Debussy, and actually I want to hedge on that. I know he knew Ravel. I'm not certain if he knew Debussy or not. But anyways, with Coppola, what's interesting is you're hearing the music about as close to the horse's mouth as you can get. And interestingly enough, unlike someone like, say, Karajan, it's not as lush and beautiful. It's a little bit more on the intense dramatic side. I would say both pieces, especially La Mer. And the recording quality is actually not bad for the early 30s. So if you want to hear these works in sort of quasi-authentic versions, although certainly we don't know for sure what Debussy would have thought, but this is about as close as you can get in time. This is, by the way, with the Paris Conservatoire Orchestra, lending even more authority, you might say. It really is fascinating to hear the works played that way. So that is Debussy. And next we have the great Czech composer Antonín Dvořák. And we've already talked about a few of his symphonies, the last three. Now I want to discuss for orchestral pieces his Slavonic dances, these wonderful, colorful works. The most famous of which is, there's two sets of them. And the most famous is in the second set, number 2 in E minor, this gorgeous melody, very kind of nostalgic and sad sounding. And my top recommendation for this one is a very good sounding recording from George Szell and the Cleveland Orchestra. Szell and Cleveland, you can always count on them for orchestral splendor. They bring the energy and clarity, but also it's a very beautiful recording as well. That E minor dance, it just sounds gorgeous. Just that alone is worth the price of the disc. So that's my top recommendation. I'd also want to mention a couple of the quote-unquote idiomatic interpretations. This one's from 1959 in fairly good stereo with Karel Sežna. And this one just has wonderful exuberance. They obviously love this music, really vibrant and lots of fun. I also want to recommend famous Dvořák conductor, Václav Talić. This is also, again, with the Czech Philharmonic. This is from 1950, so it's a little bit more dimly recorded, but it also has that idiomatic character to it, the wonderful way of inflecting the music that is really priceless if you love these works. Okay, so that is Dvořák. Now let's talk about an English composer, probably the foremost English composer, Edward Elgar, and his masterpiece, the Enigma Variations. Wonderful, colorful, dramatic pieces. And then it has one of the most famous slow works for orchestra, Nimrod. And my top recommendation for the Enigma Variations comes from one of the greatest Elgar conductors, Sir John Barbaroli. And this is from his Halle Orchestra days in the 1950s. This was recorded in 1956, It is in stereo, and it's not the greatest recording quality, but it's not bad. Maybe just the tiniest bit rough sounding, but it does have pretty good presence. Barbaroli, always just a very passionate conductor, very warm, and this just has wonderful drama and spirit, and Nimrod is just played gorgeously. So that is my first recommendation. But we also have another classic from around the same time that I have to mention, which is Pierre Monteux. This is with the London Symphony, recorded in 1958. Very good Decca sound. And Monteux brings this wonderful eloquence and humanity. That's the way he conducted. The London Symphony plays beautifully. And really, this is one I would not want to be without either. Now, one more I want to recommend, and this is a truly historical choice, going way back. Elgar's own recording from 1926. This is with a band called the Royal Albert Hall Orchestra. I don't know if they were regulars or if they were just put together for this recording or not. But obviously, you can't get more historic than hearing the conductor, the composer himself conducting his music. And Elgar was a very good conductor with his own music. Now, surprisingly, the music, it's a little bit on the quicker side, but there's just a lot of character and spirit and passion to the playing that even with the dim sound, which actually I will say for 1926, it's fairly clear. You can still you hear enough to enjoy the music. So this is really indispensable in terms of being obviously from the horse's mouth. Now, a couple of more Elgar works I want to mention, and these are smaller works actually for strings, are the Serenade for strings and the Introduction and Allegro for strings. And these are featured in one of the all-time classic recordings, and that's again from Sir John Barbaroli. This time with the Sinfonia of London, recorded in 1963. This is just a classic, great coupling with the other great English composer of the 20th century, Vaughan Williams. The recording quality is excellent, great depth to it, and the playing just has those Barbaroli qualities of warmth and passion and humanity. They really dig into the music. It's just really gorgeous stuff. Now, a newer recording that features essentially the same couplings, except you get the added bonus of Vaughan Williams' Lark Ascending, is this one from Christopher Warren Green and the London Chamber Orchestra, recorded in 1988. And first of all, it's of course in 1988 you get digital sound, and it's a very, very clean recording, very crisp. They are a little bit lighter, but it's really beautiful. There's this ethereal, mystical quality that you get. So this is all, as a supplement, I recommend this one very highly as well. Okay, so that's Elgar. Now let's move to the Norwegian Edvard Grieg and his masterpiece, Peer Gynt. Peer Gynt is just full of just wonderful themes and melodies that most people will recognize. And it's a wonderful sort of orchestral spectacular, which is very suited to my top recording, which is Herbert von Karajan with the Berlin Philharmonic. This is a digital version from 1982. And this is actually, now it's not, you can get Peer Gynt, which we'll discuss in just a bit, with the incidental music, or you can get the suites, which is what you get here, which is really, I mean, honestly, it's all you really need if you want to hear the most familiar stuff. And Karajan and Berlin they bring all their best qualities to this. The luscious sound, the drama. It's really exciting. The Solveig song is that's this really slow piece. Just sounds gorgeous in the Berlin strings. And this disc is a great coupling because you get the Sibelius pieces that we're going to discuss later, as well as you get the Berlin strings playing the Holberg Suite, which is another a beautiful Grieg work. So that's my prime recommendation if you want just the suites. Now, if you want the incidental music, which is a bit more than you get with the suites, we have this classic recording from Thomas Beecham with the Royal Philharmonic. This was recorded in 1956. You get all the same music that you get with the suites. You also get vocal music as well. For example, Solveig's song, I was just mentioning that beautiful version with the Berlin strings. Here you get a soprano sounding very lovely as well. Now, Beecham, the sound quality is not, you can't compete with Carrie Ann Berlin in digital sound. The presence of that one is just insane. But this one is very good too. It's very good stereo sound, and Beecham brings all his charm and he's so good in just bringing out the colors of these pieces. So this is a really good version. Now, another one that includes the incidental music is this one from a fellow Norwegian, Alfinn Fjellstad. This is with the London Symphony, 1958. And it's not quite as well recorded as either the Carrie Ann or the Beecham, or as maybe spectacular and brilliant sounding. But what you get here is this, the sort of the native soulfulness and idiomatic charm of the piece really comes out. So this is also very recommendable. He does, unlike Beecham, you don't have the vocal contributions. It's all instrumental, but it is the incidental music. Now, one more Peer Gynt recording I want to mention is this one from the late 40s, one that you might not automatically think of when you think of Grieg. This is the All Russia Radio Orchestra with Nikolai Golovanov. And it's a fairly rough sounding recording, but if you've ever heard a Golovanov recording, they tend to be very intense, and this one is no exception. It's super intense, super dramatic, very virtuosic. It almost sounds maybe a little unidiomatic for these works, but it's so exciting that I just have to mention it. If you want to hear Peer Gynt played just all out, red-blooded, this is a great version. Okay, so now let's move to the great Baroque composer George Frederick Handel, and his masterpieces for orchestra, the Water Music and the Music for Royal Fireworks. Again, like Corelli, if you're in the mood for hearing maybe something that's not as dramatic and more sort of the pleasant Baroque sound, especially the Water Music, this is a good one to put on. My top recommendation for this one is an older recording in a modern instrument style that some people may find a little bit too large and heavy for these works, but I think it's actually very well done. And that's with Raphael Kubelik in the Berlin Philharmonic. Again, names that you don't necessarily associate with Handel, but these are really wonderful recordings. The Music for Royal Fireworks is vibrant and alive and powerful and strong, and the Water Music is really beautiful, just a gorgeous sound. I know some people think of these recordings as not only a little bit on the heavy side, but I've heard it said that they sound almost like they're just being played through. I don't agree with that either. I think they're very sensitive recordings where they're not trying to impose any sort of interpretive will, and it's just very natural sounding Water Music and a really exciting fireworks music. Now, at the same time, you probably will want to hear these recordings done with period instruments, and we have a couple of really good ones. Starting first with Trevor Pinnock and the English Concert. Like I said earlier, they're always a good choice for people who maybe are hesitant with period performance. They have a very full sound. They're not overly, fast. And the Royal Fireworks music is really exciting, lots of great spirit, and the water music is also done very stylishly. So this is a top choice, as is this one from a conductor and a group we haven't, I don't think, discussed yet, and that is another period pioneer, Christopher Hogwood and the Academy of Ancient Music. These recordings are, the Pinnick recordings, by the way, are from the early 80s. This is just a few years before that, late 70s, like 78, 1980. And these recordings, Hogwood and the Academy of Ancient Music were always really great with Handel. Very stylish, very graceful, especially in the water music. I think this may be my favorite recording of just the water music by itself. Just really ethereal and beautiful. I would say the Royal Fireworks music, it's the same qualities, very charming and graceful. It maybe could be a little bit more on the powerful dramatic side, but it's still really great Handel playing. So those are a couple of period instrument versions, a couple of more recordings of just either one by itself. And this first one is of just the water music. This one is going back a little bit further. This is 1958, or actually, no, sorry, 1960, I should say. This is with Hermann Scherchen and the Vienna State Opera Orchestra. And don't be fooled by the date. This isn't your grandmother's Handel. Scherchen was kind of ahead of his time. Some of these are actually done fairly quickly. And the recording quality is very good. The sound is very vibrant. And it's a really communicative version of the water music, very, very beautiful, very spirited, and one that you should check out as well. Now for the Royal Fireworks, we have a couple of classic recordings I need to mention. One is sort of a digital classic. This was, I believe, the very first digital recording. This came from Telarc in 1978. This is with Frederick Fennell and the Cleveland Symphonic Winds. It's coupled with the Holst military suites. And the recording quality is still impressive today. You hear the clarity of the percussion and the brass. It just comes out wonderfully. Really exciting. It really does come across almost as, just like military pomp and circumstance, but it's very exciting. Then another one I have to mention, this is a classic, is from 1959. This is conducted by Charles Mackerras, and this is one you have to know the history of. It's very big, and the recording quality, it uses a ton of instruments, and it's going to be a little bit muddy. It was recorded in a church, so if you want clarity, this is not going to be your top choice, but there is exuberance and power and love of the music, and the circumstances are such that they got together the best brass players in London, and they actually recorded this at midnight. The players were probably busy with other things that night, so they needed a time to get them all together, and they did this on the 200th anniversary of Handel's death. So it really was an occasion, and you hear that in this performance. It's a real emotional, powerful performance that you don't want to miss. If this doesn't make you love the Royal Fireworks music, I don't know what will. Okay, so that is the Royal Fireworks music and water music. We also have from Handel sort of an homage to Corelli that we mentioned earlier, his Concerti Grossi Opus 6. Well, Handel was an admirer of those works, and he composed his own Concerti Grossi, also Opus 6. And just like those pieces, these are great. Just sort of, if you want a day where you're just put on some Baroque music for a couple of hours, this is a great set. It's a little bit more varied and dynamic, I would say, than the Corelli. And for this one, I do recommend a period performance as my top choice. This is from 1997, very well recorded, from Andrew Manza and the Academy of Ancient Music. And this is recorded in a beautiful acoustic, very warm sounding. It's very stylish, very vibrant, a lot of quick virtuosic playing as well. So you really can't go wrong with that. If you do want a good modern instrument version, we have one from just a few years before that from Yuli Turovsky and the I Musici de Montreal. This one is also very stylish. It is modern instruments, so it's slightly heavier, but not too much. It's very sparing use of vibrato, very warm, very nice acoustic. So this is also an excellent choice. And then I also want to mention this old classic. This is from 1938. This is a British outfit, Boyd Neal and the Boyd Neal Orchestra. So this is sort of this old English classic, and it really does communicate the love of the music and warmth, but it's also got a lot of spirit and character as well. For me, my main thing is always sell me on the music. I want to hear performances that communicate a love and spirit of the music, and I do hear that here, even though it's not, it can't compete obviously with the modern sound. It's fairly dim, but it's still played with a lot of character and worth seeking out. Okay, so that is Handel. Now let's talk about Paul Hindemith, a really fascinating composer. He was really, you might say, he was the last great German composer. We have this long line going back to, through Brahms and Schubert and Beethoven and then Mozart and Bach and, Buxtehude, if you want to go back that far. And then you had World War II, and everything obviously was, we're going to talk about Richard Strauss later. And the sort of elegy he wrote for German culture. Paul Hindemith was a modern composer, but he did harken back to his roots and the sort of contrapuntal writing of Bach. So he incorporated that into his music, but his music was definitely of the 20th century. It was avant-garde. It wasn't, your sort of strictly tonal music. The tonal center was, sort of changing, you might say. And the other interesting thing is he was a composer that was, because of his music, being considered, too modern, too avant-garde, he was blacklisted by the Nazis, and he ended up moving to the United States. And his symphonic masterpiece, the Symphonic Metamorphosis on themes of Carl Maria von Weber, a classic German composer. He really wrote it with American orchestras in mind, with the virtuosity and brilliance of American orchestras. And so it's only fitting that my top choice is maybe the virtuosic orchestra, the sort of quintessential virtuosic American orchestra, which is the Cleveland Orchestra under George Zell. This is from 1964, and they just really bring out the color and the excitement of these works. It's sort of an orchestral smorgasbord, and it's a lot of fun. So that's my top choice. But I also want to mention Hindemith's own recording, and this is, ironically enough, back with the Berlin Philharmonic. This is recorded in 1955, although it sounds pretty good, but it's not as good as the Cleveland recording. And it's not as brilliant or virtuosic as the Zell, but it does have a lot of character, and obviously you have the insight of the composer himself. So this goes a long way to advocating for the piece as well. Okay, so that's Hindemith. Now let's talk about a Swedish/British composer who I wouldn't call him a one-hit wonder. He wrote a lot of great things, but sometimes you come upon a composer who wrote one piece that's just so iconic, and they're so identified with that one piece that you almost want to think of him that way. And that's Gustav Holst, and of course I'm talking about The Planets, which is this wonderful piece with a different movement for each of the planets. Just a real work of genius, and definitely one that is an orchestral spectacular. It's a piece that is often recommended for people who are new to classical music. And so you want to hear it in good sound, at least definitely starting out. And my top recommendation for this one is one that is pretty universally admired, and that's this sort of digital classic from 1986, Charles Dutoit and the Montreal Symphony. And the sound, of course, is fantastic. The prototypical demonstration CD. The orchestra sounds wonderful. Dutoit was never one to, sort of fuss with. He was never idiosyncratic. The Mars is very powerful. The depth of the sound is just amazing. But then there's the ethereal beauty, which I think is unmatched in this recording, and that's, for me, is what really especially puts it over the top. It's just gorgeous playing, gorgeous sound. Now, another conductor who really was very associated with the planets is Sir Adrian Boult, and he did many recordings. I think there's maybe like 5 of them that are out there. Maybe the most famous might be his last one from 1978 with the London Philharmonic, but I actually think that one doesn't show him at his best. It doesn't show him at his most dramatic. I would say even better is this one, the New Philharmonia recording from 1966. Pretty good stereo sound. And just really powerful and dramatic. I would say it's a good complement to the Dutoit recording. It's maybe a little bit more on the rough side, but Mars is incredibly dramatic and powerful. That iconic opening of Jupiter is just fantastic. So if you've only heard the last Boult recording, you might be surprised what you hear if you check this one out. As well as this one, which is not the first one to get because of the sound quality, but one that you might want to seek out if you love the planets, and that's this one from 1945 with the BBC Symphony. Fairly dim recording quality. It is a studio recording, however, and this one is even more energized, more dramatic. So for someone who knew the piece so well, this one carries the proverbial stamp of authority, and it's definitely one that you should hear. But after hearing the 1966 New Philharmonia recording. Now I want to mention one more, another conductor who was great with the power and drama, and that is Karajan with the Vienna Philharmonic this time. This is one of those Decca Vienna Philharmonic recordings he made from 1961. And this one is just spectacular. The sound quality is for its time demonstration worthy and still sounds great today. The playing is fantastic. And Karajan, he just, he was so great with the drama, the dramatic pacing. It's really one of the iconic Planets recordings. And it comes with the earlier mentioned Pierre Monteux Elgar Enigma variations. So definitely a worthy disc. Okay, so that is Holst. Now I want to mention a Czech composer, Janáček. Who was a 20th century composer, and he was fairly well-rounded, orchestral, piano, chamber. He was more known in his own time for his operas, which we'll discuss those later. But probably his orchestral masterpiece is Sinfonietta, which is a really colorful piece, really exciting, great for brass players. And for this one, I want to mention the one by a fellow Czech conductor, Raphael Kubelik. This is with the Bavarian Radio Symphony, recorded in 1971, so it's a fairly good sound quality, a really great stereo, and the playing is just fantastic. He has a really great dramatic pacing, and you can't go wrong with this one. However, I also want to mention one that's sort of more a vintagey version from another Czech conductor, and this is Bretislav Bakala, and this is with the Czech Philharmonic. Now Bakala, Janáček was actually his mentor, and Bakala was devoted to the music of Janáček. So if you want to hear it again from the horse's mouth, this is definitely one that you want to seek out. It also comes with his maybe Janáček's overall masterpiece, the Glagolitic Mass, the wonderful choral work. The sound is a little bit dim, but it's got that Czech Philharmonic vibrancy to it, so it really doesn't sound that bad. It's a very passionate, very, very soulful version of it. And again, for me, I want to be sold on the piece, and so when I hear it being played like this, that's what I consider indispensable, even if it's not pristine sound quality. So that's Janacek. Now let's move on to, okay, if we're talking about now orchestral tone poems, we have to discuss Franz Liszt, the quintessential romantic composer, known mainly for his piano works, but he also composed several tone poems, of which the most famous is Les Préludes, the Preludes. And this was actually supposed to be a prelude for a four-movement choral work, but it became its own standalone piece. And really, it's sort of a mystery exactly what it meant. It's a programmatic work without really a defined program. All I can tell you is it's an orchestral work that shows Liszt his color, his romantic flair, his drama, and there's beauty, and some might say bombast. I don't go there. I take things for what they're worth. If I'm in the mood for something like that, then this is what I listen to. So, and if I want to hear it done really, really powerfully and dramatically and beautifully, I go again to Karajan in Berlin. Their version comes from 1967. You can get it. There is a Deutsche Grammophon Originals which pairs it with a few other pieces, including I think like the Smetana Moldau perhaps. And so that's definitely recommendable. I like this because this is like the older set. I think it comes like as a Deutsche Grammophon double now, but it's an all-list program. So you get some of the Hungarian Rhapsodies, you get some of the other tone poems, and then the Les Préludes is just really fantastic. Just really brilliant playing from the Berlin Philharmonic, and Karajan's dramatic pacing. You can't go wrong. The only other version I'll mention is another one from a conductor who had a great sense of dramatic pacing, and that's Kubelik. This is with the Berlin Radio Symphony, the great series of recordings he made with them in the late 50s. This is paired with, incidentally, his wonderful Dvořák Ninth Symphony. And it's a little bit more grounded than Karajan. It's not, it's not quite as overtly dramatic maybe, but it's very beautifully played. And for me, it's also one of the strongest Les Préludes that I've come across. Okay, so now let's go to another romantic composer, Felix Mendelssohn, and some wonderful orchestral music that he wrote. The Hebrides Overture, also known as Fingal's Cave, and the reason for that is he actually visited a cave in Scotland called Fingal's Cave, which gave him the inspiration for this piece, which he didn't call it Fingal's Cave, he called it the Hebrides Overture, but then people alternate between the two names. They are the same piece. And then also the overture and the incidental music to A Midsummer Night's Dream, which includes the famous wedding march. Bum, 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 but also has lots of other colorful themes. Just really, really great orchestral music. And my recommendation is the old classic. I've already recommended the Symphony No. 3 that comes as part of the CD. This is with Peter Maag and the London Symphony from the late 50s. Excellent Decca sound. And Maag just had such a great sense of pacing in these works. He really was a great Mendelssohn conductor. And the London Symphony plays, beautifully, just wonderfully paced, just everything you could want for these works. So that's my recommendation for these Mendelssohn works. And now we will move on to Mozart. Now, we discussed Mozart at length, of course, with the symphony videos video and also the video on concertos. With the orchestral, other orchestral works, there's really not as much to discuss. Of course, we didn't have tone poems yet. He wrote wonderful overtures for his operas, but we'll discuss those just as part of the operas. I do want to mention, however, a couple of his serenades, masterpieces. The first of which is his very famous Eine kleine Nachtmusik, a little night music. This is Serenade number 13. Of course, it's the one that goes bum 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 bum, written for string orchestra. And who better to go to for this one than the wonderful string orchestra in Musici. This is their 1972 recording. They did do one in digital sound in the 80s as well, which is also very good. This one is maybe just a slightly bit maybe more full and more warm, but you also get with this one a great coupling of the divertimenti as well as the Serenade Notturna. Really, you can't go wrong with either one. Very vibrant, wonderful clarity, just a lot of great spirit and just wonderful playing. So that's my recommendation for that. His other really popular serenade is the number 10. That's the Gran Partita. And for that one, I recommend another Philips recording. This is with Edo de Waard and the Netherlands Wind Ensemble. This is from 1968. And this is a very polished, very dignified, very noble account that really brings out the grace of the writing. There's a wonderful scene in Amadeus where Salieri is looking at Mozart's musical score, and he describes this movement where you have an oboe sort of hanging and then dropping and then picked up by a clarinet, and you have this sense of this just wonderful phrase and warmth, and that's from this piece, and so it's really a gorgeous piece and beautifully done in this recording. Now, I also want to mention one more recording that combines both these serenades together in a larger outfit, which is the Vienna Philharmonic, and that's with Wilhelm Furtwängler from the late 1940s. The sound is not great. It's definitely more on the dim, kind of muddy side. But the reason I recommend this one is Furtwängler's musicality is just wonderful sense of phrasing and humanity. It really does add something to these works. You may not think of him automatically when you think of Mozart. You may think of Furtwängler as being heavy and romantic, but really these are graceful interpretations and really lovely and a great supplement. Okay, so that is all I have for Mozart. Now we go to Russian composer Mussorgsky. His pictures at an exhibition, his sort of masterpiece, as well as the shorter Night on the Bare Mountain, which you may know from the original Fantasia from 1940. Now, pictures at an exhibition was actually again, this is descriptive writing. He's describing. A friend of his had paintings that were in an exhibition, and so he's sort of musically describing what he saw visually. And he actually wrote this piece for piano, but it was later orchestrated by Ravel. And ironically enough, that's the version that is the most popular. And my top recommendation for this is a very famous recording, a real orchestral spectacular. And that's the one from Fritz Reiner with the Chicago Symphony, another one of these RCA Living Stereo recordings. And they just played lights out. It's just such a colorful, exciting piece. Again, Reiner, as a conductor, he let his instruments play away. And they just all sound beautiful, and colorful. And the very end, the gate of Kiev, just sounds really exciting, as does the Night on the Bare Mountain. It's got that bum 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 bum, and it's just so riveting in this recording. It's really one of the best Reiner Chicago collaborations. A great CD, by the way, of several other Russian miniatures, so to speak. So highly recommended. Now, another recording I want to recommend for that same coupling, it's a little bit newer. Again, this is one of those pioneering digital recordings that Telarc came out with. This is with Lorne Mizell and the Cleveland Orchestra. This is after the Zell days, but they still had that wonderful virtuosity and clarity, and those are definitely qualities that you hear in this recording. Very exciting, very crisp. You want that sort of orchestral spectacular with these works, and you definitely get that here. Now, for a couple of recordings of the sort of older vintage side, one that we've already discussed, the Discmate. This is also with the Chicago Symphony, and this is with Raphael Kubelik from 1951. Again, we've already talked about the Bartók music for strings, percussion, and Celesta. This pictures at an exhibition is really great. It's not the sound quality of the Reiner, although it's fairly decent mono. It's Mercury living presence, but the interpretation is really dramatic and really intense. Kubelik was such a great conductor. So as a supplement, I really think this is one that you should seek out. It's only the pictures. It's not the Night on the Bare Mountain. But for that work, I think this is one that is definitely worth hearing. As is a really old recording, but in surprisingly good sound for its age. Serge Koussevitzky, another one of those great virtuosic American orchestras, the Boston Symphony, recorded way back in 1930. But I was shocked when I listened to this again recently at how good the sound is for 1930. You really get a lot of great presence. And you can hear the wonderful colors and lushness in the orchestra. The Boston had such great string playing under Koussevitzky. Koussevitzky also was a great conductor at dramatic pacing. It's a very expansive opening, for example. And even though you definitely want to hear this piece, again, it's just the pictures at an exhibition, not the Night on Bare Mountain. Even though you want to hear this piece in spectacular sound, as you definitely do with Reiner and Mizell, the interpretation is so strong that this is also one that you'll want to hear. Okay, so that's the Sorgsky. Okay, now we come to, I just have to do these pieces. I know some people will kind of turn their nose at this, but if you're new to classical music, you should hear, if you haven't already heard it at however many weddings you've been to, Pachelbel's Canon. This disc, first of all, I just want to mention, this is a great disc. I'm not embarrassed at all to say that I love this recording because you get all those Baroque bonbons on one CD, and they sound great. This is with Karl Münchener and the Stuttgart Chamber Orchestra. Recordings come from 1977. There are a few of them from the 60s, but mostly from 1977. Very, very good sound. And they're very charming and warm and beautiful. And what can I say? I know the Pachelbel's Canon is overplayed, but when you hear it done well, it still has its charm. And then you have these other Baroque bonbons too. You have the Albinoni Adagio, gorgeous, kind of sad work that is often coupled with a Pachelbel's Canon. Again, beautifully done here. And you get this tripark of Bach short pieces: Jesu Joy of Man's Desiring, Sheep May Safely Graze, and the Air on a G string, taken out of the Orchestral Suite number 3 that we discussed earlier. All also beautifully played. Handel's Arrival of the Queen of Sheba. You get the Boccherini Minuet. So it's really a great disc, especially if you're new to classical music. Recommended highly. Okay, so that's that. Now let's move on to the next composer in the letter P, Sergei Prokofiev, a great 20th century Russian composer, very dramatic and skilled in orchestration, just wonderful orchestral color. And his masterpiece for a ballet, Romeo and Juliet. This was one of my favorite pieces when I first got into classical music. It's just such a it's such a melodic piece. There's so much to love about it from beginning to end. And my favorite recording of this really has never changed since the first time I heard it. This is with Lorne Mazel and the Cleveland Orchestra, 1973. This is the entire thing. Often you'll just hear it like maybe the suites, but it's so well done that despite the fact that it's on 2 discs, this is my top recommendation for this work. It's virtuosic, it's wonderfully recorded. It just hits all the notes, you know, in terms of pacing and the sound and the playing. It's just great. I can't say enough good things about this recording, especially if you're like me coming into classical music. This is really a great one. Really, the only other recommendation I have is an old recording from, again, Serge Koussevitzky in the Boston Symphony. This is that wonderful recording they did of the First and Fifth Symphonies in the 40s. They also did the Romeo and Juliet Suite Number 2, which has a lot of the most popular numbers. And old recording, not that badly recorded. It's 1945, but played with such passion and drama and the beautiful Boston strings that I do recommend this one as a supplement. Okay, so that's Pachelbel. Now let's talk about, what did I say? That's not Pachelbel, that's Prokofiev. But actually, we're not done with Prokofiev. Because now we have another piece of Prokofiev's that is lighter, but it's definitely one of his most famous and popular, and that's Peter and the Wolf. It has a narrator. It's one I heard when I was in school because it's a great way to learn about the instruments. You have different characters represented. You have that wonderful theme for Peter. Bum 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 bum. Yes, I've always loved that melody. And this is a piece that, it's not that hard. So there's a lot to choose from. But there is a vintage version that I want to recommend as a first choice, partly because of the narrator. And that's this one from Mario Rossi and the Vienna State Opera Orchestra. This was recorded in 1957. It's a fairly well recorded stereo, a lot of vibrancy to the sound. The playing is very good. They play with character, but really what makes this is the narrator, Boris Karloff, one of the iconic voices of all time. Just that deep voice. He was of course the Grinch and How the Grinch Stole Christmas. Just very authoritative and commanding, and that by itself makes the disc. But the playing is also very good. So that's my first choice for this. I do want to recommend one more, in part because of the coupling, which is the more traditional coupling, and that is with the Saint-Saëns Carnival of the Animals, which we will discuss in just a bit. This one is from the late 80s, so it's a very good recording quality, very clear and clean. This is with Richard Stamp and the Academy of London. Really, really beautiful sounding recording. And you get another commanding narrator from Sir John Gielgud, English gentleman, very commanding and authoritative. So that's an excellent choice as well, especially if you want this coupling of the two pieces together. Okay, so now we've discussed already Claude Debussy, and now we go to his sort of impressionist cousin, you might say, Frenchman Maurice Ravel. And the first thing I want to discuss is Ravel's masterpiece, really, the ballet Daphne and Chloe. And my top choice for this one, it's just a gorgeous atmospheric piece, just beautiful. The conductor who conducted the premiere also conducted my top choice for this, which is Pierre Monteux with the London Symphony, recorded in 1959. Excellent vintage Decca sound. London Symphony sounds spectacular, and Monteux he brings the qualities of warmth and sensuousness and evocative qualities to this work. It's just one of those classic recordings that has really stood the test of time. It really makes you love this work. So that is my top choice. But there are several good recordings of this piece. One I want to mention from the same time period, and also a French recording, a French conductor, I should say, is André Cliton with the Paris Conservatoire. This is from 1962. Also great at evoking the spirit of the music. But I would say that he's even a little bit more dramatic. A little bit more excitement to this one, maybe a little bit more edge, you might say. So this is also wonderfully done. Now another classic recording. Again, you can always tell a great piece if it has, too many good recordings to choose from, and that's certainly the case with Daphne and Chloe. This is another classic, and this is with Charles Munch and the Boston Symphony from 1955. Don't be fooled by the date. This is one of those living stereo recordings that was just, a demonstration recording that still sounds fantastic today. The clarity, the brilliance, that's really, I would say, compared to the sort of ethereal sensuousness of Monteux. Here you get a little bit more of the sort of orchestral brilliance and clarity, which is also fantastic. So Munch kind of gives you that maybe other side of the piece. So this is definitely a top choice. But we also have another sort of classic, demonstration CD, you might say, and this is one of those early digital classics. And this is from Charles Dutoit with the Montreal Symphony. This was recorded in 1980. And Dutoit, he was never one of the more sort of assertive conductors. He was more on the gentle side, and that really works well with this piece. It's just a gorgeous recording, just really lovely, wonderful phrasing, and the clarity of the recording and the warmth of it just adds to that. So another top Daphne. But I still have one more, actually. And this is from another great Ravel conductor, Ernest Ansermet with the La Suisse Romande. This is from 1952. It's mono. So it's a little bit dim and a little bit rough sounding, but it's just a beautiful interpretation, just beautiful phrasing that just sweeps you away, with the orchestral writing, and wonderful playing as well. So another strong Daphne. Okay, but if we're talking about Ravel, you cannot not mention his most famous piece, the Bolero, as well as his maybe other most famous piece, the Pavane pour une enfant défunte. I think I said that correctly. Pavane for a dead princess, which actually is not as morose as it sounds. She may be dead now, but it's actually talking about a princess dancing in a Spanish court, and it's portraying this old Spanish dance that a princess would do, and it's a very nostalgic piece. Played a lot, as is of course the Bolero, iconic work with the dun 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 dun, and you have that person on the percussion that just continues the whole piece, like 20 minutes or 15 to 20 minutes. I've never understood how they are able to maintain that concentration. One of my favorite pieces when I was a kid, and I still love it, and I'm not ashamed at all to admit that. For the Bolero, my first recommendation goes back to my earlier recommendation for Debussy, which was the Carrion disc, this wonderful Carrion coupling of the La Mer and the Prélude à l'après-midi d'un faune, as well as, did I say La Mer as well? It also includes the Bolero, played very beautifully, maybe a little bit longer than a lot of people do, but actually that is the way Ravel preferred it, and I think it works best that way when it kind of builds slowly. And the orchestra sounds fantastic. Those Berlin strings, when they come in at the end, it just really packs a punch. And this also comes with the second suite from Daphne and Chloe, which includes some of the best music from that. So it's a really great sort of starter disc for your two impressionist composers. Now for the Pavane, I also want to mention one that is coupled with the Daphne and Chloe I recommended, with Monteux. The London Symphony, they performed the Pavane. It's a very short work, and the nostalgic sentimentality of the work comes out here, but it's done in a very subtle way, really beautiful, and just a lovely interpretation, very well recorded. Now, I do want to recommend also for those two works another recording that is an all Ravel set. That comes from Jean Martinon and the Orchestra de Paris from 1974. Really exciting. The Bolero is taken a shade faster, but it's really exciting, just wonderful virtuosic playing, and the Pavane is shaped very well. And like I said, this comes with an all Ravel disc, and so you can't go wrong with this one. Now, another set of all Ravel recordings that I want to finish with is, like Debussy, I mentioned Piero Coppola and those old pioneering recordings. We also have a set of Ravel, and I especially want to highlight the Bolero. This is the very first recording of the Bolero, done in 1930, with, I don't even know who the orchestra was. I think we don't really have it identified, but Ravel was there in attendance, so it has the stamp of authority, which makes sense because real quick story, he very famously preferred a slower tempo, and when the work was first becoming known, Arturo Toscanini insisted it has to go faster, and the two men actually had an argument backstage about it. Ravel actually refused to stand up when Toscanini acknowledged him to the audience afterwards. So there was that little feud that happened. So obviously Ravel felt very strongly about it. And here we do get the slower tempo with Coppola, and I think it works great. I think the way it slowly builds tension and power, that mesmerizing effect of the piece, I think that's the way it obviously was intended. Great character to the playing too, and surprisingly well recorded for 1930. It actually is fairly clear. So if you're interested in historical Ravel and historical Bolero, I think this is excellent, as well as it includes lots of other Ravel as well. Okay, so that is Ravel. Now let's talk about the Italian composer Respighi and his fabulous tone poems, headlined by The Pines of Rome. Really colorful, virtuosic pieces. The final movement is The Pines of the Appian Way, which is just spectacular. And for this one, I actually recommend a mono recording because it's just that good, and it's from Toscanini with the NBC Symphony, late 40s, early 50s. The sound is not that bad. It's kind of dry, as Toscanini tended to be, but it's fairly clear, and you won't care after you hear Toscanini's passion, the excitement, the virtuosity. It's really overwhelming. It's really, for me, it's one of the best things that he did. Now there's also the Fountains of Rome, which is really colorful, and the Festo Roman. That's also a really exciting piece, and just in Toscanini's hands, you can't go wrong. Now, if you do want the sort of demonstration sound quality, then certainly you can't go wrong with Reiner and Chicago. This is from 1959, and this is the Fountains of Rome, the most famous piece, as well as the Pines of Rome. I'm sorry, I got that flipped. The Pines of Rome, the most famous piece, but also the Fountains of Rome. And certainly in this, as you're probably going to want both of these, because the sound quality here is fantastic. In the RCA Living stereo sound with the Chicago Symphony, it's just so colorful. You're able to hear everything in this large, massive sound. Very exciting playing. So this is definitely a standard for these works as well. So that's for Spieghi. Now we come to one of my absolute favorite orchestral pieces of all time that I to this day I still never get tired of. Rimsky-Korsakov's Scheherazade. You want to talk about evocative. This is the story of Scheherazade, who, so you had this king who would marry, and then when he was tired of his wife, he would dispense with her and then move on to the next one. And so you had Scheherazade, who was the clever one, who figured out how to keep him intrigued by appealing to his mind and telling him a new story for 1001 Nights. So that's the old Arabian legend. And this piece tells the story of Scheherazade, and it's just wonderfully colorful, just great melodies. It's a great orchestral showpiece. And my top choice for this one is an early, I think it's digital. Actually, it may not quite be digital, but it's close enough. It's 1979. It's Kirill Kondrashin and the Concertgebouw. Wonderfully recorded, great warmth and power, and the interpretation is just spot on. Kondrashin just paces everything wonderfully. And then you have, for my money, the best portrayal of Scheherazade. She's portrayed by a solo violin. You have Hermann Krebers, the concertmaster of the Concertgebouw, just sounding beautiful. And then the final movement is real exciting and powerful. So this is an old standard that I still stick by as the first Scheherazade to get. Now, a newer recording that is also very recommendable is this one, with Valery Gergiev and the Kirov Orchestra from 2002. This one is really exciting, wonderfully recorded, and really passionate. Gergiev is real assertive and dramatic. You might find it a little bit, it depends how you want your Scheherazade. He's definitely more on the assertive side, and I think it really works. It just really packs a punch. So for me, I'm not content with just one Scheherazade, and this is definitely one to add to the list. As is this old classic from Thomas Beecham. This is with the Royal Philharmonic, 1957. Sound is pretty good stereo. It's not as good as the Kondrashin and Gergiev, but it's pretty good. And the thing is, Beecham just had this magic touch about him. It's not the most dramatic Scheherazade, maybe the most powerful, the most immaculately played, but he's just had this, Scheherazade, it's all about creating that sort of dreamscape, that magical, evocative, almost kind of sensual spirit. And Beecham just had that magic touch about him that really brings the music home that way. So I think this one still remains today one of the top choices for a Scheherazade. Now, another famous version from olden times, not that old I should say, but from 1964, in pretty good stereo, is this one with Leopold Stokowski, who recorded it several times. This is a piece he was well known for. In fact, he has one from 1927 with the Philadelphia Orchestra, which is fairly noisy. It's got a lot of hiss to it, but that's one of my favorite ones. He did wonderful things with the Philadelphia Orchestra back then. But I think for your first Stokowski Scheherazade, this one from 1964 with the London Symphony is really the first one to seek out. It's really, really good sound quality. And Stokowski, like Gergiev, was more on the assertive side. Really passionate and dramatic. Again, some people may think it's too much personality for them. It depends how you want to hear the piece. There are lots of interpretations that all have their different qualities, and definitely for Stokowski, it's that sort of showmanship, I would say, of really milking all the drama and passion of the piece, which is something that comes natural with a work like Scheherazade. Now, another recording from the same time period, 1968, also with the London Symphony, that I highly recommend is this one from Andrei Previn. This one actually is more on the sort of the, a little bit more on the gentle side, I would say, comparatively. I mean, it's still powerful, it's still dramatic, but it's a little bit on the slower side, and I think it really works. That sort of magical kind of evocative feeling. You definitely get that with Previn, as well as real powerful climaxes. So that to me is also still a top choice. Now, another vintage recording that I think should still be remembered today, and really is one of the top Scheherazades, is this one, both in terms of the playing and the Everest sound quality. This is from 1959. This is with Sir Eugene Goossens and the London Symphony. And this is just a great Scheherazade. Goossens, he's not like Stokowski. He doesn't come out the gate being as dramatic as all get all, but it's a very natural interpretation that builds slowly and has a very exciting finale. But there's a naturalness to it, and a beauty, and the sound, it gives it this clarity that it really deserves to be remembered as one of the top Scheherazades. For me, it's just as good as any out there in terms of your first Scheherazade, even with the older sound quality, because it sounds great in this Everest sound. Okay, a couple more I have to mention. One is, you may be surprised I haven't mentioned it yet, because it's arguably the most famous one out there, is Reiner with the Chicago Symphony. Now, they're one of those living stereo recordings, demonstration quality. This is from 1960, so they were really on a roll by then. And I will say this, it is a absolutely famous recording, and it's brilliant and impressive, and it really knocks your socks off. It's a little bit more on the faster, assertive side. Personally, for me, the problem I have with this recording, and this is just me, it's not shared by a lot of people, I'm more impressed by it than I am moved. I feel like those kind of magical, sensuous qualities that I hear with, say, Beecham, for example, I feel a little bit colder when I listen to this recording. And like I said, Reiner was one who tended to he wasn't a very sentimental conductor. He kind of played it straight. And for me, personally, Scheherazade needs a little bit more. It's a little bit on the stiff side. Yet at the same time, you can't deny the brilliance and the orchestral virtuosity and the power. It's very impressive. So it still deserves its place as a great Scheherazade. It's just, for me, it would not be my only recording. Now, one that's a little bit newer, from 1990. Of course, 1990 is now, over 3 decades ago, but to people of my generation, it still feels new. This one is with the London Symphony, and this is with Charles Mackerras. And this one, as you expect with Macaris. It's got great clarity. It's a little bit more on the assertive, faster side. It's got wonderful brass playing. The orchestra sounds fantastic here. It's crystal clear, and it's really, really beautiful. I would say on this one too, it's a little bit stiff for me, a little bit. It's not as passionate and sensuous as someone like Stokowski, for example. But again, there's more than one way to do it, and it's such a beautiful score that hearing it like this is still worth something, and that you get this wonderful telarc sound as well. So that's Macaris, and then I have one more. This is a mono recording, but it's a fairly good sounding mono. This is with the Philharmonia and Issei Dubrovin. I think I'm pronouncing that correctly. I'm not exactly sure. Now this one is very passionate. This is very red-blooded, dramatic. They just play their hearts out. Some people may actually think it's a little too over the top, but it's for me still a Scheherazade worth keeping around, just for the passion involved, and the wonderful playing. A very dramatic version, even though it's a mono, but again, pretty good mono. Okay, so that's Rimsky-Korsakov. Now let's talk about some overtures, sets of overtures, and this is overtures by Giacomo Rossini. Of course, one of the iconic Italian opera composers. One that you definitely are going to be familiar with is the Barber of Seville. But then we also have the William Tell Overture. I won't even bother, if you know the Lone Ranger, you know that one. And for this one, my recommendation for this is Fritz Reiner Chicago, one of my favorite Reiner Chicago collaborations from 1958. Excellent sound, excellent playing, just so exciting, real colorful. It's not all just virtuosity for virtuosity's sake. Again, Reiner was a master at bringing out the best in his instrumentalists, and this recording really allows them to shine. You're not going to hear that famous Lone Ranger theme at the end of the William Tell Overture. You have to hear the Chicago Brass play that. So this is really a no-brainer. However, like with Respighi, I mentioned Reiner, and I also mentioned Toscanini, and so I will in the Rossini overtures. This is again with the NBC Symphony, late 40s, early 50s, not the best sound, a little bit dry, a little bit dim, but you really need to hear Toscanini in this music. It's so exciting, a little bit on the fast side, but just, what an incredible virtuosic machine that orchestra was under Toscanini. This is a wonderful set of display pieces for Toscanini in his NBC days. Such an obvious passion for the music, and just real exciting. So that is Rossini. Now we're getting closer to the end. We're at the letter S. And we discussed earlier the Prokofiev Peter and the Wolf, and how it's often paired with the Saint-Saëns Carnival of the Animals. My first recommendation, however, for this piece is an all Saint-Saëns program, partly because it includes other Saint-Saëns pieces like the Danse Macabre. If you ever try to envision what it's like to have a midnight party of skeletons, that's what this is. And this is a early digital disc from 1980 with Charles Dutoit and the London Sinfonietta in the Carnival of the Animals and the Philharmonia in the Danse Macabre. The Carnival of the Animals, again, it's another one of those pieces like the Peter and the Wolf that you can say is something that kids would enjoy. I don't know. I still like it as an adult. Apparently, Saint-Saëns he didn't want it performed in his lifetime. It was just a piece that circulated amongst friends because he didn't want to be seen as a non-serious composer. But like for example, The Swan, one of the most famous, probably the most famous, movement or short work that he ever wrote, with the beautiful cello solo. The evocative aquarium, and then there's this, it's just a really wonderful, inventive piece, and nothing to be ashamed of, Camille. This recording is just real colorful, beautiful, evocative. It's really a great version. And then the Danse Macabre also tops it off. However, if you do want it paired with the Prokofiev Peter and the Wolf, this version is also very beautiful with the same conductor as the Prokofiev, Peter Stamp and the Academy of London. It's a little bit lighter than the Dutoit, I'd say, but really real crystal clear sound and real ethereal sounding, gorgeous swan. The piano playing is very virtuosic, so this is a great version as well. You can't go wrong with either one of them. Okay, so that's Saint-Saëns. Now let's go to Jean Sibelius, the Finnish composer. We've already discussed his wonderful violin concerto, his symphonies. Sibelius was a great composer of tone poems. Again, sort of painting a scene of something. And the first recording I will recommend, and if I can find it, is I discussed earlier Grieg, fellow Scandinavian composer, and the Peer Gynt suites conducted by Karajan with the Berlin Philharmonic. We also get Sibelius's Finlandia, the Valse Triste, and the Swan of Tuonela, all recorded in 1984 in excellent digital sound. Finlandia opens up so dramatically, and it has that wonderful tune at the end, beautifully played by the Berlin Philharmonic. Da 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 da. So passionate and soulful, just really beautiful. And then the strings just play beautifully in the Valse Triste, and especially the Swan of Tuonela, just gorgeous. So can't recommend this one highly enough. So that's it for those pieces, but now I want to mention what is maybe Sibelius's masterpiece for his tone poems, and that's Tapiola. It's based on a legend of a character named Tapia, I think, or Tapius. But anyways, it evokes the atmosphere of being kind of lost in a forest, and up there it's an icy forest. So it's kind of menacing, and then you have this storm show up at the end, and it's really beautiful writing. It's this is the essence of what a tone poem is about. And my top choice for this piece is actually I already mentioned for the 4th and 7th symphonies this recording, so it's coupled in this disc, which you can also get in a complete set of the symphonies, by the way, by Loren Maazel and the Vienna Philharmonic. First of all, the sound is fantastic, both the playing and the recording quality, which comes from 1968, I believe. The atmosphere is great. There's sort of this shimmering, icy atmosphere that Maazel brings to it, this sort of starkness that makes you feel like you're there in this icy forest. So it's got a great atmosphere of mystery, and then it's also really exciting. So this is a great choice. However, I have to mention a conductor who really was great in this piece, and I'm actually going to recommend 2 recordings by him, and that's Sir Thomas Beecham, great conductor for Sibelius. First, this one is from 1955. It's in early stereo with the Royal Philharmonic, and again, Beecham just has that magic quality of bringing out the evocative qualities in the music, where you're really feeling the emotions that the composer wants you to. So this one it's very beautiful, it's very lush, and it has that Beecham magic. I hate to use that cliche, but it's really something that's real. However, this one's his best recorded Tapiola. I also want to mention this one from a few years earlier, from 1946, again with the Royal Philharmonic. But this one has a little bit more intensity and drama to it. I mean, this really is a fantastic Tapiola, and one I wouldn't want to be without. In this version, this is a Dutton Laboratories remastering, and I've mentioned them before. Dutton, it's really amazingly cleaned up for its time. For 1946, this is as good a 1946 recording, I think, as you're going to hear. So I don't, unless you're really fussy about sound, I don't think there's anything to be afraid of here. It's just a really wonderful recording of this work. But finally, I also have to mention one from the early sort of pioneering champion of Sibelius, Robert Kajanis, with the London Symphony. This is from 1932. We've already discussed his symphony recordings. This is a really intense, evocative recording as well. I've never heard that storm sound so menacing at the end, and despite the sound quality, I mean it's fairly clear. You can hear it, and actually you can even hear the lushness in the string sound. So it's not a bad recording for its time. No match for Moselle Vienna, but still, if you love Tapiola, this is an interpretation you should seek out. Okay, so that's Sibelius. Let's keep going through the S's. Quite a few more to go. Now let's talk about the Czech composer Smetana and his masterpiece, My Homeland, or Má vlast. This is a piece that, first of all, we have to mention the famous second movement, which is often done by itself, the Moldau, just gorgeous. This has that wonderful melody. Bum 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 bum. Just really beautiful, and the meandering of the strings. It feels like you're on a river. But the whole thing is really a masterpiece, and it has inspired some really emotional performances that we have on disc, and it's really hard to choose between them. But I'm gonna kind of go the easy route on the first one, which is to pick the newest one, and that's this one from 2014. So a really recent recording, beautiful digital sound, and this is with Jiří Belohlávek and the Czech Philharmonic. Very beautifully done, very dramatic and soulful, and you can't go wrong with this. I'm really happy that we have something so recent and that's so idiomatic, that's really easy to recommend. However, there are a few other famous recordings that must be mentioned. First, I have to mention this one from not too long ago, 1990. However, it is a live recording, so it's a little bit on the noisy side. It's not, pristine sound quality, but it does have, very good presence and detail. Okay, now the history on this one. This is with Rafael Kubelik, again with the Czech Philharmonic. The performance is just absolutely dramatic, soulful, beautiful, definitely one of the best ones out there. The story behind this one is really, it's really one that, almost brings tears to your eyes. Kubelik left Czechoslovakia in 1948 after the Soviet takeover, and he vowed he would not come back until Czechoslovakia was free of communist domination. He had already gone through the Nazi period, and he said he wasn't going to go through anything like that again. And despite many attempts by the communist regimes to bring him back and entice him, he adamantly refused, and he went for decades and decades and decades, and he even retired from conducting in the mid-'80s. And then finally, the fall of communism happened, and so in 1990 he returned and gave this emotional performance, and it lived up to its billing. It's just really fantastic. So there's that. But we also have a couple more from another, just giant of Czech conducting, and that's Václav Talíč. This first one is from 1954, again with the Czech Philharmonic. Mono sound, but not bad. Again, these Czech Philharmonic recordings from the early 50s sound pretty good. They're very vibrant and full, a little bit rough sounding. The interpretation is fantastic. From, I guess, just strictly an interpretive side, this is my Mavlast of choice. Just very dramatic, soulful. He just really knew this piece inside out, and so this one is definitely a top choice. Now, strictly for historic sake, and I don't usually say that. I usually, make it very clear when I mention a historic recording, I'm not talking about historical importance. I'm talking about just incredible playing and incredible insights into the music. And this certainly does have that, but this is the same group. It's Václav Talic and the Czech Philharmonic, but this is a real event. This is a live recording, 1939, and this is after the Nazi takeover, when they were allowed to keep performing, but under Nazi occupation. And the crowd, first of all, the performances, very dramatic, and obviously meant a lot to them to be playing the music of their homeland while under this horrible occupation. And the crowd just goes wild. After every single movement, they burst into applause. And you can just hear the fervor and the thirst for freedom. And then after it's all done, at the very end, they break out spontaneously into the Czech national anthem. So it's really something. This is a case where, yes, the performance is great. I'm not denying that. It's definitely dramatic and powerful. But the circumstances and the crowd, that just adds something to it. And it's actually fairly well recorded. It's a live, like radio air check. I think it was like Norwegian radio that recorded it. And then it was released much later. So it's rough sounding, but it's not too bad for a live 1939 recording. Definitely a historic recording if there ever was one. Okay, so that's Smetana. Now let's briefly touch on Johann Strauss, who wrote those wonderful waltzes, the Waltz King, waltzes and polkas, just some of the most charming music. And my top choice for this is the very idiomatic version by Willy Boskowski in the Vienna Philharmonic. Boskowski not only was the concertmaster of the Vienna Philharmonic, but for decades he conducted the New Year's concerts that they did in Vienna, featuring the music of Johann Strauss. So to say they had this in their blood is an understatement. So you have the wonderful Blue Danube. You have the Kaiser Waltz, the Emperor Waltz. That's my favorite. Just a fantastic piece, and other waltzes and polkas as well. So just great fun, very charming, beautifully played. You can and very well recorded. It ranges from the late 50s into the 70s. So that's really great. Now we also have another Strauss specialist with this recording. This is a live recording from New Year's 1987. Karajan with the Vienna Philharmonic. It's a little bit heavier, slightly, a little bit more lush. It's Karajan, but it's also very idiomatic. He knew this music backwards and forwards. He was a great Strauss conductor, and this is unmissable. If nothing else, because you also have the wonderful Voices of Spring, sung by Kathleen Battle, very beautifully. So that just adds to the attractiveness. You also get, by the way, the Fledermaus Overture, which you don't get in the Boskowski set. Of course, you can always get it with the complete opera Fledermaus, which I recommend, but at least you have that here as well. Okay, so that's Johann Strauss. Now let's talk about Richard Strauss. Oh boy. Okay, so we've talked in my previous videos about, when you talk about sort of, like symphonies, once you get to Beethoven and Bruckner and Mahler, you're really talking about this enormous canon that is very overwhelming and intimidating. I said the same thing about Mozart with his piano concertos. And then for tone poems, I have to say the same thing about Richard Strauss. This is just, fantastic, iconic music. When it comes to, he wasn't the greatest melodist in the world. It's not always the easiest listening, But in terms of evoking something orchestrally, there was nobody better than Richard Strauss. His music actually, in the late 19th century, because it wasn't so melodic and memorable, it was kind of poo-pooed back then. But he lived through it past the World War II, and orchestras, they want to show off their wares, and there's almost no better way to do that than performing Richard Strauss. Just colorful, exciting, and I just love it. One thing about it is it's because it's not melodic. And it really tells a story. It's an example of how in classical music you can't just sample something for just a few seconds or a few minutes to get an idea of it. If a composer is telling a story, then it's just like watching a movie. You don't watch like 10 minutes of a movie and then give a movie review. You need to watch the whole thing from beginning, middle, and end. And so the best conductors were the ones who were the best at telling the story of his music. So I'm going to go in sort of quasi-alphabetical order in discussing these. The first one I'll talk about is the Alpine Symphony. Alpine Symphony in German, just like one word. And it is exactly what it says. It's about the Alps. It's about a journey through the Alps. In a more sort of abstract way, it's about overcoming the elements. And my top choice for this one is from a set of all the orchestral works of Strauss, and an excellent top-notch set from Rudolf Kempe and the Staatskapelle Dresden. You really can't go wrong with any of his Strauss recordings. This particular issue I'm holding, this is like volume 3, which actually I would say these are the picks of the set. However, I don't know if it's still in print. I mean, you can probably find it somewhere. But also, I mean, in terms of recording quality and even shelf space, you can get the whole thing now in a little package that I think has been remastered and very well. So that may be worth your while. The Alpine Symphony was recorded in 1971, and Kempe just has a mastery of the score. Just the beautiful colors, the drama of the journey. I mean, you really get that sense of overcoming elements and arrival, and evoking the image of the Alps as well. Very dramatic, very powerful, and to me, it's a very good introduction to Strauss as well, and what Strauss is all about. So that's a great recording. I also have to mention another top Strauss conductor, maybe the greatest Strauss conductor of all, Karajan. This is with the Berlin Philharmonic, an early digital recording from 1980. Sounds excellent. This one, I would say that the recording and even the interpretation has this sort of chilliness to it. It doesn't have quite, to me, the drama of the Kempe, but it's very, it's very brilliant. The climaxes are incredible, and it does evoke the chilliness of the Alps. You can't go wrong with this one either. I would get both. They're both fantastic, iconic versions of this symphony, and this is very well recorded as well. It's sort of one of those demonstration Karajan discs. Now another one, and this may come as a little bit of a surprise, that is excellent, is from Zubin Mehta and the Los Angeles Philharmonic. This is from 1975. Can't go wrong with the sound on this one, the vintage Decca quality. And it's a very powerful interpretation. The orchestra plays beautifully, and you really get that sense of a journey, which is what you want in this piece, this sort of heroic journey. And so this is also one of the most recommendable versions. Now, finally, I want to mention the composer's own recording from 1941. This is with the Bavarian State Orchestra. And again, this is one of those Dutton Laboratories remasterings that's excellent. It's as clear as you could get for that time period. It's still, of course, going to be limited. It's not going to be anywhere near the spectacular sound of the Karajan or even the Kemper or Meta. But it's really something to see the piece through the composer's eyes. You get the sense that he doesn't think of it himself as much of a virtuosic showpiece or orchestral, emphasizing orchestral splendor, but he's thinking more in terms of the emotional aspect of this journey. And the sound quality really is pretty good, and to the point where you can actually hear the beauty of the string sound, for example, and you can sense that Strauss was really trying to bring that out. And so there are a lot of little touches that the composer, who, by the way, he was a very well-regarded conductor in his day. He left behind recordings of other works as well, but especially his own works. It's really irreplaceable. So this is also recommendable despite the dated sound. Okay, so that is the Alpen Symphony. Now let's talk about what might be his most famous work today because of the opening, and that's Also sprach Zarathustra, which is more than just the opening. It's a fantastic work. It's a philosophical. It's hard to describe what's behind it. It's very abstract. It's based on a work by Nietzsche, which apparently he was walking along. He was taking a walk. He was philosophizing, and he came upon this enormous rock formation, and it made him think about timelessness beyond mankind. And of course, the opening to Also sprach Zarathustra was used in the movie 2001: A Space Odyssey, which happens when the apes find this large black slab. So I don't know for sure, but I imagine they must have been recalling Nietzsche. So it's a very kind of mercurial piece, very powerful. And my top recommendation for this one is one of the all-time great, in my mind, orchestral recordings of anything. And that's Karajan with the Berlin Philharmonic, recorded in 1973. Sounds absolutely fantastic. No apologies for the sound. That opening, it's as good as you can imagine. It's just so powerful and well played. And then the rest of the piece, which is really powerful and gorgeous. This second section with the strings that come in, so lush and dramatic in this version. If you want to appreciate the entire work, which you should, it's one of Strauss's masterpieces. This is a recording you should definitely get. Now, there are some other excellent recordings as well. Another very iconic one, because it's one of the sort of early stereo recording display issues, is this one. Fritz Reiner with Chicago Symphony, RCA Living Stereo from 1954. Also sounds fantastic, also very powerful and exciting. As I said earlier, Reiner is one who lets the piece do its work, and that definitely is something that has its place. It's such a masterpiece, and Chicago Symphony just plays beautifully, very powerfully. The recording engineers did a great job. It's legendary for a reason. So definitely another one you should seek out. Now, and one that is an early digital recording from another excellent Strauss conductor is one with Eugene Ormandy and the Philadelphia Orchestra. The sound is very good, and the playing is very powerful. He was really great at conducting Strauss. He obviously had an affinity for Strauss, a great sense of storytelling, and then the Philadelphia strings, in that second subject again, they sound gorgeous. I was really surprised by this one. You don't hear about this one everywhere, but when I was checking out Also sprach recordings during my Strauss phase, I was really impressed by this one. Now, I do want to mention a couple of older ones that are just really great interpretations despite the sound quality. And one comes from a conductor I almost wish I had mentioned in the symphony survey. This is a predecessor to Fritz Reiner, Frederick Stock, with the Chicago Symphony. Stock really was one of the great builders of the Chicago Symphony. You know, he conducted them for much of the early 20th century. He doesn't always get the credit he deserves for that. This version of Alsosprach is very dramatic. It's very assertive. Chicago Symphony plays very well. It's dim, it's crackly. It's from 1940. So it's not the sonic spectacular that you want. But if this is a work that you've grown to love, like I have, it's an interpretation that you're going to want to hear. And also, I will say for symphonic orchestra history, it's really great to be able to hear Frederick Stock and get a sense of what his tenure in Chicago was about. This is an issue that came from Biddulph, who they specialize in historic recordings. I'm not sure if you can even find this nowadays. They're a little bit hard to track down. It also comes with an excellent Tchaikovsky fifth. That was what I was referring to, as maybe I could have included that in the symphonic survey. Well, I mentioned it now. A very good Tchaikovsky fifth. However, I have to mention one more. And I keep talking about Kusevitsky and the Boston Symphony, but they left behind so many great recordings. This one is from 1935, and it's pretty good sound quality. Again, this is one of those Dutton remasterings, so it's fairly clear for its time. I put this right up there with Karajan in terms of the interpretation. Very exciting. He has a sort of expansive opening. It's perfectly paced. I mean, you know how that goes, right? Dun, 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 ba-bam! The 2001 theme. Perfectly paced here. And then that second part comes in slowly. And by that time, I don't care about the sound quality anymore. I'm just wrapped up in the interpretation, and it's just really a great one. Okay, so that's Alsosprach. Now let's talk about a fun piece. Don Quixote. So this is the Spanish legend of Don Quixote and his adventures with his sidekick Pancho Villa. And one thing that Strauss does here is he has solo instruments that play the characters. So you have Quixote is played by a cello. I almost thought about including this piece in the concerto survey just because the cello is so front and center, but I thought not quite enough. It doesn't quite meet that level. It's still more a conductor's piece. And then Pancho Villa is played by a viola. So it's a real fun piece. There's a very famous part where you have a herd of sheep, and he mimics the bleating of the sheep in the brass section, and I can't even describe it to you what it is they're doing. I'm not a horn technician, but it really does sound like sheep. It's really cool. But it's a wonderful piece of adventure, and then and again it's storytelling that Strauss was just a master at. So you're going to want a recording that does that well. My first recommendation for this work is a wonderful recording from the mid-60s, George Zell and Cleveland Orchestra. Actually, I should say it's actually 1960 that it came out. For some reason, it's a little bit hard to find. I don't know why that is. I mean, this to me is one of the best Zell recordings out there. He was an excellent Strauss conductor. And the cellist is Pierre Fournier, who's one of the greatest cellists out there. So you have a master cellist, great orchestra in its peak, excellent recording quality, and they just bring out the charm of the work, and they do a masterful job of storytelling. Now, at the same time, I also want to point out a recording that Fournier did earlier with another great Strauss conductor, Clemens Krauss. And this is from 1953 with the Vienna Philharmonic, and it's rougher sounding. It's one of those early Decca recordings that sound a little wiry in the strings, for example. But this one just has this magical quality about it. Very evocative, where you really feel the story and you really get into the emotions of the story. I think more than any other recording I know, despite the slightly rougher sound quality. So that's a strong one. We also have, we go back to Kempe again, this set with the Dresden Staatskapelle. This is the same volume 3 that you have the Alpen Symphony in. Again, you can get it also the complete set remastered. No reason not to do that. The cellist is Paul Tortelier, and the sound is incredible. This is from 1973. It's just really powerful, and the Tortelier does a masterful job on the cello solo. They really dig into the music. Kempe is just such a master Strauss conductor. You can't go wrong with this one either. Now, again, a couple of older versions that are worth hearing just because they're so good. One is Strauss's own version. This is from 1941. The cellist is Oswald Uhl. So with the Bavarian State Orchestra, another one of these Dutton remasterings. So it sounds pretty clear for its time. Strauss understands the work, of course. It's its own piece, and he knows exactly what to bring out, and creating that sort of magical quality of the story, that sense of fun and adventure. Strauss obviously knows exactly how to do that, and it comes across. However, I also want to mention, again, Eugene Ormandy, great Straussian. This one is, again, with the Philadelphia Orchestra, but this is from way back in 1940. And one of the greatest 20th century cellists, Emanuel Feuermann. This one's just really exciting. It's dimly recorded. It's not quite as good as the Strauss I just mentioned. It's got a little bit more hiss, a little bit more muddy. But once you really get into it, you kind of get swept away by the power of the interpretation. It's just really great storytelling. So that's my last recommendation for Don Quixote. Now we come to, Strauss. It's just endless. You can spend hours and hours listening to Strauss tone poems. Another masterpiece, Ein Heldenleben, The Hero's Life, which some people said was maybe autobiographical. You notice there's this theme of a journey. You see it in the Alpine Symphony. Obviously, you see it in Don Quixote, and also in the hero's life, and also kind of overcoming. And then towards the end, there's this quiet part, and then you have the solo violin come in, where there's this sort of completion to the life, sort of contemplative and soft. A really, really wonderful piece. My top choice for this one is, once again, I'll go back to Eugene Ormandy. Philadelphia Orchestra, this time in 1960. So it's really well recorded, beautifully played. The solo violin I just mentioned that he plays at the end, it's Axel Bruselo. Where is he mentioned? I think his name is Bruselo, Axel Bruselo. He was the concertmaster of the Philadelphia Orchestra, and that's a real standout. He just plays beautifully. And Ormandy understands this work through and through, obvious affinity for Strauss. And some people believe that Heldenleben is a work that is hard to bring off. It's fairly long. It's fairly sprawling, so you need a conductor who really does a good job of selling the work, and Ormandy does that. He just understands it through and through. You get this wonderful sense of completion at the end. So that's my prime recommendation. However, that other great, there are many of them, but especially this one, other great Strauss conductor, Karajan also gives us a great Heldenleben. This is one of those EMI recordings that he did with Berlin in the early 70s. This was from 1974. Very well recorded, nice clarity, nice fullness. And with Karajan, I have to say, they say that if you are familiar with American political history, that you know that Lyndon Johnson, he had this thing called the LBJ treatment. That was when he convinced a senator or a congressman to go along with him, and he had a one-on-one, and he just leaned into you, and you were his. That was called the Johnson treatment. Well, I feel like there's this thing of I think the Karajan treatment, where he just in his Berlin days, he had just this gorgeous, luscious sound that was just mesmerizing. And some people say, they talk about it almost like it's witchcraft, like, like the Debussy we were talking about earlier, where they're like, oh, well, that's not really what Debussy had in mind. Well, sure, but it works its magic, and it sells me on the piece, and I don't mind being being fooled into loving something that I'm listening to. So this is an example of that. It's just beautiful sound, just luscious, and you just get, like I said, Heldenleben can be a hard work to get into, and so the Karajan treatment is something that is something you want in a piece like this. So very powerful, dramatic, and like I said, incredible sound from the orchestra and the recording engineers. Now, an older version I want to recommend that also is a very good Strauss conductor and a very good job of storytelling is this one with Pierre Monteux and the San Francisco Symphony. This was recorded in 1947, fairly rough sounding, but very dramatic, powerful, wonderful storytelling. The orchestral playing is a little bit on the rough side, but again, in this case, this is something where the interpretation of this work is very important, and a conductor like Monteux is one that can make you appreciate it. Now, finally, we have to talk about the dedicee of Ein Heldenleben, Willem Mengelberg. This is, again, one of those legendary, iconic, historic recordings. You see the two of them there. Mengelberg recorded this a couple of times, I believe, but this is the real famous one. This is from 1928 with the New York Philharmonic. And first of all, Mengelberg had wonderful insights into the work. He was, of course, a genius conductor. He was very flexible. He didn't believe in just virtuosity for its own sake. He was always a conductor who looked into the meaning of the music, and he obviously understood this piece very well. So he fleshes out all the different sections and bringing out its meaning. A wonderful sense of arrival towards the end. And then you have the combination of that with the New York Philharmonic, who was always this very virtuosic top level outfit. And the combination of those two made for this just really fantastic recording, which it's obviously 1928, really old, it's limited, there's a little bit of hiss, but through the crackles you still can hear the great music and even the details. So still an iconic version of this piece. Okay, so that's Heldenleben. I'm going to readjust my seat here as we get closer to the end. Now let's talk about a piece that I alluded to earlier, which is really meaningful and symbolic in a lot of ways. I talked about how you have this Germanic line going all the way back to Bach's time that included Mozart, Beethoven, Schubert, Brahms. I mean, what a run, right? The 60s Celtics have nothing on these guys. I mean, it was incredible. But it all came to an end, a really destructive, horrible end at the hands of the Nazis. And Richard Strauss wrote what can only be called kind of an elegy for German culture. He wrote this at the end of World War II. It's called Metamorphosen. And it's a really fascinating work for strings, for 23 strings in all. And it's obviously elegiac. Am I saying that word correctly? I've never known how to pronounce that word. Anyways, that. It's very sad. But it's sad in a very, it's not overtly dramatic. It's more, there's almost this resignation about it. It's just it. All I can tell you is it's a very fitting way to look at everything that happened. In a way it's not only mourning the destruction, but also just looking back at everything, the culmination of it all, like how much there was to German culture, and just this grotesque event that occurred. So I think I've given a good enough description of what the point of it was. It's a very powerful work. And my top recommendation for Metamorphosen comes again from Karajan. This is with the Berlin Philharmonic. This is from 1969. And Karajan does just a great job of setting that atmosphere of quiet sort of contemplation. He creates again this very beautiful sound. There's almost a sort of like a distance to it, and it's beautiful. But it's not just beauty for its own sake. It definitely serves the music. You get the point. Now this one is his earlier version. He does have this one that was made in 1980. This is the digital one, and a lot of people sing the praises of this one, and for good reason. It's very powerful. There's not a lot to choose between them. I hear a little bit more of a commitment and depth to this one. That's my opinion. This one is a little bit more, to me, the recording quality is better. You hear detail in the digital version that you don't hear in this one. But I actually miss a little bit of the atmosphere that you get here, the sort of more distant, ethereal quality. This one is almost a little bit too present to my ears, even though it's a little bit maybe more impressive. The climax is incredible. They're both excellent, but my primary recommendation is this one. Now, a couple more I have to recommend. One that I was tempted to recommend as my first choice. It's a little different, and as you would expect, different from Klemperer. This is Otto Klemperer with the Philharmonia, his orchestra, from 1961. And this is really something. Klemperer does what Klemperer does. He's not obvious about letting the emotions fly. He does it in a very steady way, and it's very stark, and it's an interpretation that it's almost too brutal in a way. But I mean, obviously, for something that's this profound, that works. And I wouldn't want to be without this. It's a very emotionally impactful performance for its grimness, its solemnity. I mean, in a way, it's something that almost Klemperer was only Klemperer could have done. Recorded very well. Everything is very clear. That's another thing. I forgot to mention this about the piece. There's this repeated theme. Bum 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 ba bum ba bum bum bum, which they say is quoting the Funeral March of Beethoven's Eroica, and I don't doubt that. But it sounds also like it's a mixture of that and the beginning of the Fifth Symphony to me. In any case, it's obviously alluding to German culture and symbolized by Beethoven, and is sort of in a funereal way. With this recording, he delineates those notes so clearly, it almost hits you like a stake each time. It's just really packs a punch emotionally. Now, also we have Kempe, who this recording is no slouch either. It's very dramatic and powerful as well. Again, it's from this Dresden Staatskapelle set. Again, it comes from volume 3, which again I say for me is sort of the pick of the volumes. But again, you can also get the remastered version that includes the whole set. Very powerful, beautifully played, nice clarity to the sound as well. And Kempe was a devoted Straussian, so you get the full emotional impact. One more recording I want to mention. This is in the historic category. And this is from another really good Strauss conductor that we haven't mentioned yet. That's Furtwängler. He didn't have a lot, of course. He died a few years after the war, before we got stereo. Metamorphosen was composed in the last year of World War II. So this recording is a live recording from 1947. It was fairly new. It's with the Berlin Philharmonic, and you can imagine, as they are cleaning up their society in the rubble of World War II, that this obviously would mean something to them emotionally, and it does. It's a very moving performance, as you would expect from Furtwängler. It's actually it's a little faster than, like, say, Karajan or Klemperer. It's more emphasizing the dramatic side, I would say, and very powerful. The climax is superbly done. The sound quality is fairly, on the dim side, but not too bad. It is a little bit noisy because you have an audience, but definitely for the historical context as well, definitely one worth seeking out. Okay, so that's Metamorphosen. Now we come to, I'm going to couple two pieces together because they're often coupled together. These are two of his most popular works, earlier works, and a little bit on the shorter side. One is Till Eulenspiegel's Lustige Streiche, which means Till Eulenspiegel's Merry Pranks. Till Eulenspiegel was this sort of character, legend, who was known as a trickster. This work is a little bit more of a lighthearted work, where it kind of depicts him, pranking people. Although he does meet his demise at the end, so it's not all happiness for Till Eulenspiegel. But it's at the same time it is considered one of the more sort of lighthearted Strauss works. And then you have Don Juan, which is based on the famous legend of Don Juan, the infamous womanizer, and it starts out really robust, as Don Juan, heading out on, to attain his goal, but he gets frustrated towards the end, and he actually becomes very introspective. There's this beautiful kind of quiet central section, and then he finally meets this dramatic demise. So in a way, both pieces kind of, you can say, start out a little bit more lighthearted than other works, but they do have kind of sad endings. My top choice for this coupling comes from the same disc that I just mentioned for the Ormandy Einheldenleben, but this is Zell and the Cleveland Orchestra. Again, they always did great Strauss. These recordings are from 1957. No worries about the recording quality. It's excellent. The playing is fantastic. The virtuosity, the clarity, it brings out the charm of Till Eulenspiegel. And then Don Juan, he comes out the gate real exciting, as Zell often did, just bringing that energy. But then that quiet central section is just gorgeous. The Cleveland Orchestra just sounds fantastic. So this is really, really excellent. We also have a coupling from Karajan, from the earlier disc I mentioned of Also sprach Zarathustra. So this Don Juan and Till Eulenspiegel come from the early 70s, same time as this one. So you're going to get the fantastic sound, you get the drama and the power. It's a little bit heavier than the Zell, and like I said, these were, comparatively speaking, a little bit lighter works, but at the same time you do get that, especially in Don Juan. The beauty of the playing is fantastic, and the power. And then you got to have this also Sprach as well. so that is a top choice. Then we also have, I just mentioned him, I'm going to mention him again. These are better sounding recordings. These are studio recordings from 1954, Furtwängler with the Vienna Philharmonic. Now, Till Eulenspiegel really was a piece that Furtwängler did maybe better than anybody. In fact, we're lucky to have, it's one of the few complete films we have of Furtwängler conducting with the Berlin Philharmonic after the war. There's a video with even a dancer portraying Till. This recording, the thing about it for Wenger in this piece is that flexibility he had, that gift for making the music sound as if it's happening on the spot, really works great in this piece. The whimsy comes out, and real dramatic, real fun, and then real powerful. And then the Don Juan as well. That's a powerful recording. And the Vienna Philharmonic plays excellently. The recording quality is very good, 1954 mono. So this is definitely one of the most recommendable couplings. And then finally, I want to mention another great Strauss conductor we've already mentioned once, Clemens Krauss. This is coupled with the Don Quixote I mentioned earlier, which is fantastic. The same recording issues are here. These are 1950 recordings, and it's a little bit stringy, a little muddy, but Krauss was such a good Strauss conductor. He brings out the charm of Till Eulenspiegel, and the drama of Don Juan. All the elements are there. Once you get past the sound quality, you really admire the interpretation and the beauty of the Vienna Philharmonic as well. So that's Till and Don Juan. We finally have one more, and this is, this is one of my favorite Strauss pieces, maybe my favorite one of all, and this is Tod und Verklärung, Death and Transfiguration. And this is a reflection on the artist's life. First, he's thinking about childhood. It's a very kind of morose piece. It starts out very quietly, and he's reflecting. And then there's a sort of this huge climactic part, and then after that, he slowly, dies away. And my top choice for this one is Karajan. For me, another one of Karajan's greatest recordings. This is from 1972, Berlin Philharmonic, coupled again with the Metamorphosen that I recommend as my first choice for that piece. And it's just a tour de force. Karajan beautifully does that hushed opening, and he was just a master at always having this purpose. You know that it's going somewhere. And then the Berlin sound is gorgeous, but also with that purpose. And then this amazing climax, and then this just gorgeous dying away. Beautiful version. We also have a recording from Zell, and this is also fantastic. This is also one of Zell's best recordings, in my opinion, with Cleveland from 1957 again. The playing is just gorgeous, and the orchestral execution, of course, you always expect that with Zell, but he really gets into the mood and the atmosphere of this piece just about as well as anybody. So another fantastic version. We also have Monteux with the San Francisco Symphony. Again, this is coupled with the Heldenleben from 1947, but the Tod comes from 1960, so much better recorded. And Monteux also sets that atmosphere. The San Francisco plays beautifully. It's a very moving performance. Monteux always had lots of humanity, and that's excellent for a work like this. And then finally, I want to mention the same disc I mentioned previously for Don Juan until Eulenspiegel, Furtwängler. This is one of Furtwängler's greatest, at least Strauss recordings. It's a little less clear in the recording. It's from 1950. It's again with the Vienna Philharmonic, but it's a deeply profound, deeply moving interpretation. Like Carry-On, the climax towards the end is just really overwhelming. It's just a fantastic piece, So there we go. That is Strauss. I don't know how long that took, but like I said, for tone poems, you really should. It's kind of hard to get into, kind of like I think Mahler's symphonies in a way, or even maybe Bruckner's symphonies. But it's really well worth it. Okay, now for something not that different, almost a peer, really a peer of Strauss. We have Stravinsky, the Russian composer who really was really broke down barriers in music. He was sort of unknown before he premiered his 3 ballets in Paris, right around 1913, the Diaghilev ballets that he wrote for Diaghilev, that were all premiered in Paris. And I'm going to start with his most famous work, The Rite of Spring. Although I'm also going to mention Petrushka because they're often coupled together, so I'll be recommending mostly recordings that pair the two of them together. The Rite of Spring is, or as they say in French, Le Sacre du Printemps. A lot of people think this is the greatest work of the 20th century, and in terms of being groundbreaking as well as just really powerful, that's hard to argue with. It's not, it's very stark for audiences back then. It was very startling. It caused a riot amongst the crowd when they first heard it, like literally did. They were throwing things at the orchestra. They were so incensed. But it's a masterwork that has held sway. I mean, it was just a couple of decades later that Disney used it in their movie Fantasia. So it's definitely it has its staying power. And then Petrushka is this story about these 3 puppets, and it's a very colorful, in many ways a more whimsical piece, but also very, very dramatic. So my first choice for that coupling comes from a digital recording, 1980 to 1981, and this is with Antal Dorati and the Detroit Symphony. Dorati was an excellent Stravinsky conductor. First of all, the recording quality is fantastic. Really great depth to the sound. It's really powerful with when you hear these percussive rhythms and the orchestral sounds. It's a you want a demonstration disc, and that's what we get here. It's a very robust, dramatic, powerful interpretation, wonderfully paced, and then the Petrushka as well. So you can't go wrong with this disc. Really, his biggest competition comes from himself. In 1959, you had this recording with the Minneapolis Symphony with Mercury Living Presence. Again, fantastic sound quality, very vibrant and clear. In this recording, he's a little bit more on the aggressive side, I would say. In fact, there are some that criticize this as being, too barbaric. I mean, what do you expect from this music? But, so, you have others who say, well, this is the way I've always wanted to hear it. And that's what we get from Dorati. So really exciting as well. An excellent compliment to the Detroit recording. Now, we have to mention, I'm going to go back a little to a much older recording now. The guy who premiered both of these ballets, including that infamous performance that ended in the riot, Pierre Monteux. This is with the Boston Symphony. So excellent virtuosity. And then Monteux, obviously he knew these ballets very well. And one of his gifts was a gift for spontaneity, a feeling of spontaneity, and that's really essential in these works. To hear the Rite of Spring done not just with clarity, but also something, an interpretation that kind of keeps you on the edge of your seat, and that's what you get from Monteux. It's not going to bowl you over with the sound quality. The Rite was recorded in 1951. Petrushka was from 1959, so that's definitely a better sound quality. But it's the interpretation that, for me, really tells the story of these works about as well as anybody can. Now, another famous version of both of these comes from Leonard Bernstein with the New York Philharmonic. Very well recorded. This was back in 1958, and then the Petrushka was 1969. Bernstein's interpretation, again, we know this from Bernstein. He could never be straight-laced. He tends to milk things a bit. So the sort of the creepy sonorities, for example, in the Rite of Spring, he really digs into those. It's a little bit slower in some sections. He's not as aggressive as like Dorati, for example, but it's very powerful, and the New York Philharmonic is on top of their game. This is a legendary coupling, and for good reason. Well, I should say especially the Rite is a legendary recording. When we didn't have a lot of Rite of Spring recordings at the time. Very exciting, very powerful. Bernstein wields his magic, so definitely one to seek out. Now, another one that you should also seek out this is from 1969. This is Pierre Boulez. And this is with the Cleveland Orchestra, and then Petrushka comes with the New York Philharmonic a couple of years later. Boulez, the power of the Boulez interpretation is in it feels a little held back in a way. He's sort of the opposite of Bernstein, and he's not trying to milk it at all, but it's a very steady interpretation. And we're going to see in the composer's own interpretation that can be very powerful. This sort of relentlessness to it. He doesn't stop to smell the flowers at all. And there's a cumulative effect in that by the time you get to the end of the Rite of Spring, for example, really brings home the power of the piece. The playing is fantastic. Boulez always was great at getting excellent virtuosity and clarity from his orchestra, and the sound is excellent as well. So definitely a version worth seeking out. Now, another kind of more vintage version, and this is just the Rite of Spring, not Petrushka, is from Igor Markevich. Very powerful, very dramatic, very brusque. Kind of rough sounding and literally rough sounding. The recording quality is a little bit more on the rough side, and maybe a little bit less brilliant compared to, like, say, the Dorati Berkey recordings around the same period. But the interpretation is so powerful that kind of makes up for it. It's really one of the great Rite of Springs on record. Incidentally, this Testament version issue has two recordings of the Rite from Markevich and the Philharmonia. One is from 1951, but I don't think you're missing anything by the later one. It's no less dramatic or powerful, and then you have the sound quality to boot. So, but hey, it's always good to have the more the merrier, I guess. So, now let's talk about this famous recording, the composer's own. First of all, very good sound quality, 1960. So we're blessed to have that. And this is with the Columbia Symphony, which was a group kind of brought together of professional musicians for recording purposes. And Stravinsky, he may not have had the same gift for the dramatic that someone like, say, a Bernstein or Monteux had. But obviously it's his works, so there's obvious value in hearing how he wanted it interpreted. And what really comes across is the starkness of it. It's a really no nonsense interpretation, especially of the Rite of Spring. It's kind of more terrifying in a way, like I was saying about the Boulez, that he's just giving you the facts. It's not quite as powerful as, like, say, Dorati or overwhelming, but in its sort of discipline. Which obviously, hearing that come from the composer himself is something that's very powerful in and of itself. It's a very powerful interpretation, legendary for good reason, and one that you definitely want to hear if you love these works. Finally, I want to mention personal favorite of mine, and many others as well, despite the really old sound quality, and that is this one, Leopold Stokowski, the grand showman, and his amazingly virtuosic Philadelphia Orchestra. The Rite of Spring is from 1929. Petrushka is from 1937. They both sound actually pretty good. This is the RCA issue. I think there's like maybe Pearl issued them as well. We're going to come to there's a Dutton transfer of the Petrushka, which is really good. Stokowski just, he had that element of spontaneity and confidence and showmanship, and that Philadelphia Orchestra, it just felt like, a virtuoso on his violin who could do whatever he wanted. And it's just real dramatic and powerful. And for me, I forget the sound quality after a while. It is very dim, of course, but compared to modern recordings, but good enough to where the power of the interpretations still come across. So that is the Rite of Spring and Petrushka. Let's talk briefly about the third big ballet of his, which is the Firebird. It's a little bit, it's often done as just the suite, as opposed to the complete Firebird, but I want to recommend a recording of the complete one that's really well done. And it's the same conductor I just talked about as my top choice for the other two. That's Antal Dorati. This one is on the Mercury recording, and in this case it's with the London Symphony from 1959. And it just brings all those great qualities of first of all, the recording quality is fantastic, the vibrancy and the color, the clarity and the presence. And then Dorati and the London Symphony are just, it's very exciting and colorful. It's just as good as it gets for the Firebird. That said, I have to mention once again Stokowski, and this one is from 1935, again with the Philadelphia Orchestra. This is just the suite, and this is one of those Dutton remasterings. This one is just exciting as hell. The infernal fire music towards the end, infernal fire dance, is. I can't believe the sound of this, and that it comes from 1935. It just makes you quake in your boots. It's really good and really well recorded for its time. And then that iconic finale of the Firebird. I've never heard a version that, as like this one. It's just really exciting. And then also the fantastic Petrushka that we already talked about from 1937. That's also remastered here very well. Okay, so that is Stravinsky. We are really getting close now to the end. We just have a few composers to go. Next is Tchaikovsky. And I'm going to start with his iconic 1812 Overture. Who doesn't love this one? Well, I guess there's probably some people who think it's overplayed, but I think it's fantastic. And this one, I'm not going to waste too much time. It's very rare that I come upon a piece where I say there is one definitive recording, and honestly, I have no need to hear any other. And that's the case here. Antal Dorati, Minneapolis Symphony, Mercury Living Presence, 1958. You have to mention the recording producer of these Mercury recordings, Wilma Cozart. She deserves as much credit as anyone. This is a demonstration disc, if there ever was one. They use real cannons, and it's perfectly balanced with the orchestra. And then the orchestra sounds fantastic too, just real exciting, which is just accentuated by the amazing sound quality. It doesn't matter that it's 1958. They put so much effort into making this sound as good as it could. Just this presence, this brilliance, this excitement. It is one of the classics of all classics in classical music recording history. So, no-brainer in terms of that one. Now let's move on to something that Tchaikovsky was obviously very well known. That's his ballets. The Nutcracker, Swan Lake, and Sleeping Beauty, which my top recommendation is going to be a disc of the suites. So, that you get sort of a highlights disc. There's so many beautiful melodies in these ballets. And we're fortunate to have a recording that really does a great job of grouping them together in brilliant sound and brilliant performance. And that's this famous recording from Mstislav Rostropovich, the cellist who also was a very good conductor, with the Berlin Philharmonic, recorded in 1978. They just do a brilliant job with these pieces. I can't think of a better way to get to know them the first time. Just all the main tunes from all of them just sound beautiful and brilliant, and as excellent recording quality. You can't go wrong with this. Now, that said, I do want to recommend also sort of a more vintagey version of the suites from a conductor who was one of the great ballet conductors of the 20th century, and that's Roger de Sommières. And I recommend this, even though the sound, this is from the early 1950s, it's in mono, but there's a real charm and elegance to the way it's interpreted and performed, so that if you do love these ballets and you want to, some alternate versions, it's definitely worth seeking, especially this one. This is Swan Lake and the Nutcracker. And this is one of those full dimensional sound recordings that, even though it's mono, it does sound pretty good. And this is with the French National Symphony Orchestra. And then we have also the Sleeping Beauty Suite. This is with the Paris Conservatoire, again from the early 50s. Not quite as good sounding as this one, but fairly tolerable mono. But mainly you're listening to this for the beauty of the interpretation. Okay, now, if you do want the complete ballets, we also have some versions of those that I want to recommend. I'm gonna pull these up here. We're getting so close. Okay, let's start with the Nutcracker. Here's and these are all actually from the same time period. We're getting a lot of recordings from that late 50s, early 60s time period, but they all still sound very good. And this one, this is from Artur Roszyński, and it's with the Royal Philharmonic. This was recorded in 1958. And it's a very, very charming version of the Nutcracker. It's one of those, I always say, the best recordings are the ones that make you hear the work fresh and really make you appreciate and love it. And that's what I hear here. It's very charming, beautifully played, very warm. So excellent version of the Nutcracker, as is this one. If you want a little bit more maybe of a virtuosic display and a little bit better sound quality as well, you can't go wrong with this one. This is Ernest Ansermet and the La Suisse Romande from 1958. Very well recorded. Ansermet, he was just a consummate ballet conductor. We talked about his Ravel earlier, and the London, La Suisse Romande, they're on top form as well. So can't go wrong with that. And then finally, I want to mention this classic. We keep hearing his name and this recording series, but we got to mention him again. Antal Dorati. This is with the London Symphony. This was recorded in 1962 with that excellent Mercury Living Presence sound. Now, this one is really brilliant. It's really impressive. It's a little bit more on the, I would say, more slightly, if you want to differentiate a little bit more on the slightly aggressive side. maybe missing a little bit of the warmth and the charm of the Radzinski and the Ansermet, but it's excellent still. And if you love the Nutcracker, just to hear it played with this brilliance and recorded like this is a real thrill. Now, let's move on to Sleeping Beauty. Here's a gorgeous recording. This is from Andrei Previn and the London Symphony. This was recorded in 1974, and I would say that he really gets into that atmosphere, that sort of gentle atmosphere. It's just really beautiful. He's obviously trying to make sure that he doesn't let the music just run away and become run-of-the-mill. There's a real love for the melodic beauty of the piece, and that's what you want with Sleeping Beauty. Now we also have a really good recording I should say a really good performance from 1979 with Gennady Rozhdestvensky. And this is with, who is this with? The BBC Symphony. And this is a live recording, and the recording quality, it's present and detailed, but it is a little bit on the noisy side. You hear some coughs every now and then, but it's really more, compared to Previn, I would say a little bit dramatic, very lush, and they really dig into the music. It really is a fantastic performance. Not the most ideal recording quality, but still one that if you love Sleeping Beauty, you should seek out. And then finally, this recording of Swan Lake. This is from another iconic ballet conductor of the 20th century, John Lanchbery. This is with the Philharmonia, recorded in 1982. Sounds very good. And Lanchbery really obviously knew the ballet backwards and forwards, and it's just a real charming, spirited, dramatic, exciting, wonderfully played. You can't go wrong with this for a complete Swan Lake. Okay, so let's talk now about one more piece by Tchaikovsky, the Romeo and Juliet Fantasy Overture, with one of his, he was such a gifted melodist, that love theme. Da 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 da. Almost kind of a cliche because of the way it's used, but I think that's a good reason why you want to hear it in context of the entire piece, which is a really dramatic, dynamic piece. My top choice for this one comes from Claudio Abbado with the Boston Symphony in 1971. That theme is played beautifully. Abbado was so good at drawing out melodies. But the recording quality is excellent. The virtuosity of the orchestra is fantastic. It's just really dramatic and exciting, and an excellent version of the Romeo and Juliet Overture. Incidentally, it's a little hard to find this. This is actually like one of these Japanese issues, and it comes with his excellent versions of the 4th, 5th, and 6th symphonies that he did with both the Vienna Philharmonic and London Symphony. The twofer that has those 3 symphonies together, that's available, more readily available, it doesn't have the Romeo and Juliet. I don't know why, but you can find, last I checked, there's a Deutsche Grammophon Eloquence single symphony issue of just the Pathétique and the Romeo and Juliet together, so you should be able to find it that way. If you can't, he did a very good version with the Berlin Philharmonic as well, which I recommend. And finally, I want to mention another version of Romeo and Juliet that's a little rougher in sound, but it's also very good. This is with Igor Markevich from 1959 with the Philharmonia. And it's not as sweeping and romantic like in the love theme, for example, but he really brings out more of the tragic, dark quality of the overture, like that beginning part and the drama, which gives you another side of it if you really wanted to get to know the piece better. It's not as well recorded as the Abbado, but it's still very powerful. Okay, so that is Tchaikovsky. Now let's go to Vaughan Williams. Ralph Vaughan Williams, spelled in American English Ralph, but it's pronounced Rafe. And I want to talk again about this recording I mentioned 10 hours ago. This classic recording by Sir John Barbaroli that included the Elgar. Actually, the title of this disc is English String Music. And so it includes the Elgar pieces we discussed earlier, and then these two beautiful fantasias by Vaughan Williams, especially the larger one, the Fantasia on a theme of Thomas Tallis. Really, mystical, soft piece, and then the Fantasia on Greensleeves, which includes the famous Greensleeves theme. Barbaroli this is a justly famous recording with the Symphony of London, again from 1963. He gets the atmosphere just right, and it's recorded beautifully, and he's got that warmth and humanity. It's just really an ideal recording. I forgot to mention actually the Elgar. There also are a couple of other shorter pieces. I mentioned Introduction for Allegro for strings and Serenade for strings. There are these two shorter works, Elegy and Sospiri, that are by Elgar now. Those are gorgeous and fantastically recorded and really dug into. That's actually with the New Philharmonia, and Barbaroli. So it's really, this is a classic disc. Now, as I mentioned earlier, it was somewhat replicated by Christopher Warren Green in this later recording from 1988 with the London Chamber Orchestra. But with Christopher Warren Green, you get not only the fantasias, you also get the Lark Ascending, which is another gorgeous piece that Vaughan Williams wrote for a solo violin and string orchestra. Incidentally, so the lark is this little bird, and it's very, very songful. If you look up on YouTube, a lark singing, you'll hear, you may possibly already know this, but I certainly didn't. But they have this way of singing that if you then listen to that and then go back to the Vaughan Williams, you'll realize the violin is imitating really well the sound of the lark. It's really fascinating. It's just a gorgeous work, and Warren Green actually plays the violin solo for that. So that's beautiful. The two fantasias are done really well. Again, like I said earlier, it's a lighter sound, which actually has its own kind of ambiance to it, and it's a very clear recording. Now, I also have to mention another classic Lark Ascending recording that actually, I would say my first choice would be the Fantasias with Barbaroli, and then this for the Lark Ascending. Iona Brown on violin with Sir Neville Mariner and the Academy of St. Martin in the Fields. Beautiful job on the violin solo. The recording is from 1972, so it's very warm, full. Of course, Mariner's group just always sounded gorgeous in string music, so you can't go wrong with that. Okay, that is Vaughan Williams, and now we've finally come to the final composer of this chapter here, Wagner. Okay, Wagner, one of the greatest, of course, opera composers of all time. But one thing about Wagner is, of course, the operas are very long. And it really is, in a lot of ways, easier to get into Wagner by first listening to his orchestral music. So all this orchestral music I'm going to mention are little chunks that come out of his operas. They're all fantastic, familiar to most people, and a great way to get into his music. This disc here, I think, is an excellent kind of gateway into Wagner. This is Karajan with the Berlin Philharmonic, 1974. It's recorded on EMI, not Deutsche Grammophon. They are, in their heyday, and the sound is fantastic. That huge, luxurious sound. Karajan, knew Wagner very well. And just dramatic and powerful. You have that wonderful Tannhäuser overture. Bum 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 bum. And actually, this version, it's like an alternate version. It's the Paris version. So there's a part in the middle where all of a sudden it breaks into this weird bacchanal, which is interesting. But it's also a very powerful performance. And then you get the Die Meistersinger Overture, which is really powerful and famous. You have the Lohengrin preludes, especially that exciting, prelude to the third act. And then to top it all off, the iconic Tristan und Isolde Prelude and Liebestod. Just one of the greatest things ever written, really. A watershed in music history. That dramatic opening. And then the Liebestod, which in the opera is at the very end, and it's sung by a soprano. This is the orchestral version. That's also really beautiful. Fantastic sound, fantastic playing. Really, you can't go wrong. Now, I mentioned about how it's almost easier to get into Wagner through just the orchestral works. There's Tristan und Isolde, and then there's also the Ring Cycle. If we're talking about famous Wagner operas, the Ring Cycle is the Der Ring des Nibelungen. It's a set of 4 operas, so it's extremely long. I think it's like 15 hours, something like that. But it includes, iconic music. So it's really good to, if you're starting out, to try out a disc of the orchestral music from the Ring. And we have that here, played very well by the Cleveland Orchestra under George Zell. This was recorded in 1968. They're going to bring the orchestral brilliance and the clarity, and if nothing else, this disc is worth it just for the Ride of the Valkyries, one of the most iconic things ever. Bum 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 bum, and these guys just really bring it in that piece. You also have the Magic Fire music from the Valkyr. So this is a great way to kind of dip your toes into the Ring Cycle. Finally, I want to mention one of the greatest Wagner conductors of all, but unfortunately in slightly less than ideal recording quality, and that is Furtwängler. Next to Beethoven and Bruckner, nobody was more associated with Furtwängler than Wagner. His just sense of pacing and drama and the passion. Furtwängler, he dripped feeling with everything he conducted, and Wagner is tailor-made for that. So he has, there are lots of different Furtwängler recordings of the orchestral bits from Wagner's operas out there. Most all of them are from live performances. I think there's maybe an EMI that might have some studio, but he was always his best live anyways. This is really the ideal one, I think. This is Deutsche Grammophon. You can also find it in that box that I alluded to earlier. That box also includes the Strauss Metamorphose, incidentally. But these recordings are live with the Berlin Philharmonic, late 40s, early 50s. They don't sound terrible. There is great, really good presence to them. But it's the performances that you're going to want to hear. The Tannhäuser and the Overture and the Die Meistersinger Prelude, just so sweeping and powerful. And then if you really want to hear something dramatic, the Siegfried's Funeral Music from Götterdämmerung. Just a crazy climax to that one, as well as the Tristan und Isolde Prelude and Liebestod, for which Furtwängler was especially known, just really powerfully done. So I would say once you are maybe done with the carry-on, you want to seek something also powerful, but even though it's not ideal sound, you want to hear Furtwängler. Okay. That is it. Thank you for watching, and I really appreciate it. I hope you've liked this series. So now we've covered symphonies, concertos, orchestral works, pretty much everything else in orchestral, the major orchestral works. I still want to hit chamber music, solo piano music, vocal and choral, and opera. So a lot still to go, and I hope you'll subscribe and keep listening. Thank you.